Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get started with our council session today, July 23rd. We will begin our session with an invocation by Reverend Tim Simpson from Green Ridge Baptist Church. Please rise as you're able.
Let us pray. Almighty God, eternal Father, we respectfully bow before you this morning, acknowledging that you are creator and provider and sustainer, that all of life comes from you, Lord. Thank you for this new day. Your word says that every morning your mercies are new to us, so we thank you for that, Lord. Lord, we thank you for these men and women who are part of the county council. We respectfully try to understand, Lord, the great burdens that they have to respect the law and also be responsible to citizens. So, Father, would you grant them great wisdom today with your mercy and compassion. We're a very blessed community. Many of us have more than we need, but we have citizens who don't have what they need yet. So we pray that the council would reflect and make decisions with justice and mercy. We pray, Lord, for those among us who need more of all of us. We thank you for our system. We thank you for this government and pray, Lord, that this will be a day of your blessing and favor on our county, and that you'll use the hearts and minds of these men and women to do a good work of justice among us today. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.
Thank you so much, Reverend Simpson. And now we're on to a proclamation recognizing the celebration of the dynamic Michael Bobbitt, Artistic Director of Adventure Theater, by Councilmember Reamer.
All right, I know my council member colleagues are all jealous of me because I got to do this proclamation today, because Michael is he is a treasure, and we are going to miss him so. Michael has been the lead actor in the Montgomery County art scene for years, and he has. I just know when I see you in your role as a leader in the community, when I attend a production at the theater, it just makes me feel special. It makes me feel like this county has a really dynamic, creative, electrifying combination, and you're going to bring that to Boston, and we'll try to fill the gap somehow. But we want to celebrate you, Michael, because you've just been you've represented the best of what this county is about, and you have made the art scene in this county come alive. And we are so grateful for everything you've done. I have a proclamation that I will read, and then I'll just invite you to share any reflection you'd like to share. For those who don't know, Michael has been the artistic director at the Adventure Theater, which is at Glen Echo, for 12 years. And in that role, he has absolutely created a stellar and thrilling arts production enterprise. So the proclamation recognizes as much of that work as we could fit into words. But you have to see it to experience it. You know, every production you see at the Adventure Theater, it'll stick with you. Whereas Michael J. Bobbitt has inspired the lives of more than 750,000 children and youth in Montgomery County and around the world through musical theater productions, training, and new theatrical works. And whereas Michael has expanded the reach and impact of Montgomery County through transferring an Adventure Theater and Musical Theater Center show off-Broadway and taking an ATMTC production on an international tour to Singapore and Malaysia, and launching the careers of Broadway performers and creating lifelong patrons of the arts. And whereas Michael is a leader in the theater community and beyond by focusing on equity, diversity, and inclusion through thought leadership, providing training and experience for emerging actors, artists, and directors who are people of color, and expanding capacity in the arts and humanities by providing the finest technique-based training to children regardless of their background or financial situations. And whereas Michael's service to this community also includes his work on countless boards, including Leadership Montgomery, the Rockville Chamber of Commerce, Nonprofit Village, Maryland Citizens for the Arts, Theater Washington, and the Arts Commission of Rockville. And whereas Michael has taken a local jewel and made it into a treasured arts organization for Montgomery County, transforming the theater into a professional children's theater, merging in the Musical Theater Center, writing and commissioning 32 new works for the Theater for Young Adults, and earning 62 Helen Hayes nominations and 8 wins. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland, hereby congratulates Michael J. Bobbitt on 12 years of service as Artistic Director at the Adventure Theater of Montgomery County, and the County Council commends your achievement, Michael, in the arts and the children of our community, and wish you well in all of your future endeavors, presented today and signed by the Council President and myself. Thank you, Michael Bobbitt. Thank you.
All right. I'm not usually stuck for words, but this is really, this is really very, very, very special. Thank you so much, Hans, and thank you so much, County Council. It's so great to see so many faces that I've known for so long. I am humbled because the work that I've done is really on the backs of so many people. Adventure Theater is 68 years old, and I started in the 56th year of the organization. And there were so many staff and so many board members that supported the work that I had. Several of them are here today. My family and my son back there taking video. Hi, son. Thanks. But I'm also really happy that I've been able to call Montgomery County my home for the last 15 years. It is very sad to be leaving it and moving to Cambridge. I will always maintain a connection here. I still have family here, so I'll be back. I would like to say that the only way I was able to do the work I was able to do was because of the support of these people behind me. The moving to a new district and seeing what the legislation, how the legislation supports the arts in their community. What you guys do is unprecedented, and it's massive compared to what's happening in other states. So the only way Adventure Theater has succeeded, the only way I've succeeded is because of the support of the County Council, and so I am eternally grateful, and this will always be my home. So thank you all so very much. Thank you.
All right, we're going to all come forward and have a photo together.
All right, now we're on to general business. Let's see, Ms. Lamarzi, do we have any announcements?
Yes,
or
good morning.
acknowledgements?
The council has received a petition signed by over 1,100 persons opposing passage of ZTA 1901, accessory residential use, accessory apartments. There are no other calendar changes this morning.
Okay, so there are no minutes for approval this week. Now we're on to item 2. This is the consent calendar. Any motion?
So moved.
Moved by Council Vice President Katz and seconded by Councilmember Reamer. Let me acknowledge that we are making appointments to quite a number of boards and commissions today, and really want to express my appreciation to all the residents who volunteer to give us their opinion, their talent, to share with us many recommendations. It is really amazing to see how active our residents really are and how they're willing to always make a contribution to our county. So I want to thank everybody. I do also want to acknowledge that we do have Executive Regulation 17-19, Small Business Assistance Program. The Fed Committee recommends approval, and this is basically to raise the cap from $75,000 to $125,000 as possible assistance for small businesses that are affected by county-led revitalization or redevelopment projects. And this is something that the businesses who participated came to us and we're responding to their feedback. So I do want to thank the Fed Committee and everybody who has been tracking this important program. Very, very critical, especially with the Wheaton small businesses. So thank you so much for that. I don't see any lights, so all those in favor of adopting the consent calendar, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you so much. Okay. I'll speak louder. All right, so now we're on to item number 3, and this is a zoning text amendment, ZTA 19-01, accessory residential uses, accessory apartments. The Fed Committee recommends approval as amended. We have had several sessions discussing many of the components of this particular ZTA, and today we are here to vote on the ZTA and move forward. So, Councilmember Reamer, Chair of the Fed Committee, I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll proceed with conversation.
Thank you, Council President Nancy Navarro. So the council in its previous 2 sessions has gone through the various provisions and expressed its general view on those. There may be 1 or 2 other items to take up today, but generally speaking, I think we have gone through everything, and we are ready to have a vote. So I will turn it to council staff to let us know if there are specific additional issues or other issues that we need to be aware of, or that council members may wish to discuss.
Well, the first thing is I got the memo wrong on the summary of the council action, in that you had one other action that I didn't report. And that was changing the setbacks for buildings longer than 24 feet. I didn't report that as a summary of the council finding, and it should have been reported that way. It is correct in the ZTA itself that has that on lines 200 to 205. The other thing is we've been trying to not to change all mentions of accessory apartments to accessory dwelling units. We missed one apartment, so we'll have to make that change as well. I believe that the text behind the memo reflects all of the decisions made by council in accepting or changing the recommendations of the Fed Committee.
Okay, thank you. So now would be a time if there are any additional amendments that a council member may wish to propose. Otherwise, I think we have reviewed all of the elements of this proposal, and it is before us as an amended proposal.
Okay, Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a follow-up to our last conversation, we did discuss screening, but we're not able to arrive at language that addressed the very reasonable concerns and discussion we had before the dais. So I appreciate council staff working on providing some amended language that hopefully clarifies some of the concerns that were raised. For context, again, I do believe that there are legitimate concerns with regards to privacy and intrusion of neighbors who may have a detached unit built next to their home. And so I believe a reasonable option to address some of those concerns with regards to privacy is requiring that there be screening, whether it be a fence, whether it be shrubs, whether it be some type of landscaping. And so before you is some language that would require, and as I've stated from the beginning, it's the detached units that have given me the most pause and the most consternation, and I do believe are the most significant change that we're proposing within zoning. And so I do believe that the amendment before you provide some additional cover, no pun intended, to the neighbors involved in this issue, could potentially head off conflict that may arise between neighbors and address some of those privacy concerns, while also still allowing it to move forward. So before you is the amendment proposed, and it states in the R90 and R60 zones, without regard to applicability provision of Section 652, any newly constructed detached accessory dwelling unit must provide screening as described by Section 653C4, Option B. This requirement may be waived with the consent of the closest property owner. And on the second page is language with regards to some of the provisions of what we'd be talking about to provide some scope for the potential landscaping options. So I'd like to move that we consider this amendment. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, so it's
As a
been moved by
technical,
Councilman.
just as a technical matter,
Yes.
this would go after line 177. Where's that? Excuse me.
We have to also remove this, Jeff.
Okay.
Remove this provision screening over 6.
We would have to also remove a section on a line. I don't think that line is there. It's already gone. Excuse us a second. We're just making sure we're able to put this in code.
No. Line
Oh.
86.
Line 86 would have to be deleted, and we'd have to renumber that section. But the actual provisions of what that screening would require is in code. It would require 10 foot of screening, even though some of the otherwise minimum side yard requirement would be 8 feet. So it would actually require some additional, 2 feet additional setback.
All right, Councilman Marino.
Sorry, can you just say what you just said again? It would require a 10-foot?
The provision requires 10 foot of landscaping, whereas some of the narrowest setback otherwise required by code, particularly in the R60 zone, is 8 feet. So this, in some cases, would require 2 foot of additional setback.
And why did the sponsor choose option B instead of option A? We see on the second page, there appears to be one that, is option A different than option B?
Yes. It actually requires a fence.
Oh, option A requires a fence.
So,
So these are the two options, A or B.
right.
So it's an additional setback. Well, that's challenging. All right.
All right, Councilmember Jawando.
On R60.
Just for clarity on that point, Jeff and Pam, so fencing would satisfy the requirement though, or no?
No,
Under this new, so it has to be
it
landscaping?
has to be landscaping.
And then which would require the additional setback
Correct.
of 2 feet?
In some cases. In some cases, the setback can accommodate that.
Already.
And if you looked at option A, which is also in the code next to option B, there is that requirement for the fence, but the fence in this part of the code is 4 feet tall. So I'm not really sure if you said, well, could we look at option A over option B? What you'd achieve there is you'd still get a fence, but it wouldn't be
It wouldn't be really
very
for
tall.
screening.
This screening in the code we're referencing was really designed to screen townhouse developments. We really don't have one in the code that's already written for screening in the residential detached zones. So that's
So-
why we're trying to fit something that's a little different.
So just so I'm clear, if a fence would not fulfill this requirement, so someone would need to plant landscaping
Correct.
Right.
and have the additional setback to allow for that, from that landscaping, depending on the lots,
Zone.
the zone.
Right.
Okay. Go ahead. Yeah, that's different from what I thought
Yeah.
we were doing.
Couldn't the bushes be on the neighbor's property, though? Does the setback have to be?
The permit's required to be on on the
Okay.
owner's property.
And we're talking about 2 feet, though. I mean,
Correct.
it's not substantial and in terms of adding to the potential setback overall, in my opinion.
The cost of landscaping is more than the cost of fencing, you know, it depends, but it's they're both expensive. Okay, I just thought we were talking fencing, but okay. Thank you for the clarification.
All right. I don't see any lights. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. I was prepared to support something that might have just been some landscaping, but having an additional setback is of concern to me, so I don't want to make things up in real time and try to further amend the amendment. And I would just remind my colleagues that if a neighbor is feeling that they are unhappy with their other neighbor's decision to do this, they could also landscape, they could also put up a fence. But hopefully, neighbors will be good neighbors, and they'll talk to one another and discuss their mutual desire for a respectful living situation, and either build a fence or plant landscaping if that's what they would like to do. Thank you.
All right, I don't see any other lights, so all those in favor of this particular amendment, please raise your hand. Okay, that's Councilmember Jawando, Councilmember Albornoz, Rice, and Councilmember Katz. All those opposed? Councilmember Glass, Hucker, Friedson, Noadro, and Reamer. So it doesn't pass. Okay, what's next?
All right, now I think, unless there are additional amendments, I think we are at the point of
Councilmember
vote. Now,
Friedson has a light.
I was going to suggest if council members wanted to make comments, the council president can tell us if now is the time that she would like to.
If we don't have any other amendments, I think I'd like to go ahead and take the vote, and then we'll open it up for comments. For a clarification is fine.
So I just wanted to make one, not necessarily a clarification, but the companion bill that we had has an effective date of December 31st as currently drafted. This bill has an effective date of December 31st as currently drafted. It is my understanding, having conversations with the chair and the clerk and the president's office, that we believe that the companion legislation, that is a doable, based on the current schedule, that is a doable timeline. I just wanted to, I've confirmed that privately. I think it's important to confirm it publicly, because the idea of the companion legislation is to, as Councilmember Jawando would say, put the trains on the same track. And so I just wanted to confirm that publicly. I think it's important.
And I believe what's on Circle 30 did not change the effective date, but you had talked about it before, and it should have been December 31st. I'm sorry, we got it right on Circle 16. It's correct.
Yeah, it's accurate in here. I just wanted to make sure that everybody confirming
Yes.
publicly with the president and with staff that December 31st we think is accurate in here, is what the companion legislation is, and we believe that it's doable and
I
there'll
don't
be.
believe that has changed, so
Okay.
we
Okay.
already discussed that.
Thank you.
And that is what was requested by the hearing examiner as well, so we don't have a period of time where the zoning's changed, but the standards of a hearing would be different.
Terrific. That was just one other point. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so this is a roll call.
Mr. Glass?
Yes.
Mr. Glass votes yes. Mr. Jawando? Yes. Mr. Jawando votes yes. Mr. Hucker? Yes. Mr. Hucker votes yes. Mr. Reamer? Yes. Mr. Reamer votes yes. Mr. Albarnos?
Yes.
Mr. Albarnos votes yes. Mr. Rice?
Yes.
Mr. Rice votes yes. Mr. Friedson?
Yes.
Mr. Friedson votes yes. Mr. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Katz votes yes. Ms. Navarro?
Yes.
Ms. Navarro votes yes.
It's unanimous. Just want to say, I want to express my appreciation for everyone, to everyone for their work to get us to this point. Councilmember Reamer, I know this has been a long process, and the Fed committee has worked very diligently to address and get us to this point on this ZTA. I also want to say that, as we continue to have discussions in the county and also regionally about how to approach the need to develop much more housing that we are currently creating. Just this weekend, and a COG retreat, a Council of Governments retreat in Cambridge, leaders from the region came together to acknowledge that at this point, we have a target to create 320,000 more units between 2020 and 2030. But the latest assessment is that we're going to need 75,000 more units. And I see Ms. Grand Wright here, who was there as well. And this is a regional target, but it means that Montgomery County is going to have to come to grips with how we're going to address this need if we're going to be able to basically play in this regional approach to how we keep up with the demands. And so this particular vote is just one step. It's not what's going to address this entire need, but it's just one tool that we can have. And in conversations with people about, their young professionals, their millennials who just graduated from college. This weekend I attended 2 celebrations of such millennials who can't afford to live in the county, or retirees that are looking for ways to live in the county, or in-laws that may want to come. This is just one option for that. So I wanted to share that because it is very important to understand that this is not going to be a humongous proliferation. It's just one tool. And the bill 22-19 that we will also consider is going to have a lot of provisions. I've heard loud and clear are gaps in enforcement, so we are going to be strengthening that. But I think that it is important to understand that we in Montgomery County don't live in an isolated regional space, and we're going to have to be serious about how we respond to those needs. I would also mention that workforce housing is important. I see our police officers in the back, and the latest report did say that about 40% or so of our staff, of our employees here in the county, live outside the county because they can't afford it. So there's just a lot of issues that we have to address, and this is just one small tool. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you, Council President. I really appreciate your comments there. You put your finger on the issue so nicely, and I think your observation about your chance to spend some time with younger members of your family, your daughters, underlies what this discussion is about. I think there are so many families in our county that are struggling with the high cost of housing, and whether it's children looking at their prospects to graduate from college and have a chance to live anywhere near where they grew up, or if it's retirees who want to be able to stay in this county or move to this county and live near their grandchildren, the cost of housing has changed the conversation about what tools are available for them to be able to do that, because people are being priced out and they're being shut out. And the way that families want to live increasingly is in proximity to one another. So I want to thank you, but underneath all of that was also the focus on racial equity, and you have put this issue on the table for the council to grapple with in an open manner, and I think that has come to play in this conversation in a very helpful way, as it, I think, ensured that as we worked our way through this issue, that we were addressing our own county's history and learning about how zoning creates housing, contributes to the high cost of housing and puts housing out of reach of many people. And we are working to try to improve some of that, to change some of that. So I want to thank you. I want to thank the members of the committee, Mr. Jawando, Mr. Friedson. You did a marvelous job. As we sort of joked, finishing up the Fed session on this, that you're grizzled veterans now of land use and zoning and the Fed committee's work. But you contributed so much. I think the committee's recommendation was very thoughtful, and yet at the same time it was resolute, and it was a terrific combination of ideas and an influence. And I want to thank you both again for what you did, and to all of the members of this council. Each of you played an invaluable role in bringing issues to the fore and making sure that we discussed and deliberated on every point and reached a conclusion that is a thoughtful, balanced, and refined approach to creating accessory dwelling units. We have removed some of the highest barriers to a type of housing that is more affordable to build, and yet we have done so in a way that is thoughtful, that is refined, that addresses concerns that have been raised. We're doing this because This is an increasingly a way that families want to live. They want to live in proximity to one another. They want to be able to, adult children want to be able to live with their parents or grandparents. Families want to be able to invite grandparents or adult children to live with them, or take in a renter. That is absolutely part of the changing response to the high cost of housing in Montgomery County. Through it all, there certainly have been voices of exclusion, and we've heard from many that they are opposed to having this type of housing in the county. And I just really want to thank my colleagues for being resolute in the face of those comments and of that criticism. This council has a history. We have several histories. You know, we've learned about many of them. We have a history of exclusion. We have a history of using zoning to create exclusive communities in this county. We also have a history of championing progressive reforms, of inclusionary zoning, of fair housing laws. I think today's reform really fits in the strong progressive tradition of housing policy in Montgomery County. And it is one more tool to add to our repertoire. As the council president said, this is not going to fundamentally change the character of the neighborhoods in this county, as some have asserted. It will be a tailored and practical improvement, and it will bring a very precise type of housing opportunity where it's needed. And I think it's going to pay off in a very positive way over time. So again, I want to thank my colleagues. And lastly, I want to thank the council staff. You guys did a marvelous job. Jeff, you know, you, from the beginning, you've been able to help us think through the consequences of every detail of this zoning code reform, and you are a master of the Montgomery County zoning code, and we really appreciate everything you've done along the way. And Pam, you've stepped into your new role so ably and really helped to, I think, make this a smooth path. The planning board and the planning staff, Jason, Lisa, Gwen, Tanya, what a team. You've been able to respond in real time with terrific research and analysis. I thought your findings that there are not more children living at addresses that have an ADU than at those that don't was kind of a game changer. It helped to really explain how these units are used. Your findings that there is not an overpreponderance of cars, that, you know, maybe every 3 ADUs comes with an additional car. It's very practical, was extremely useful. So the facts that really played a huge role in this conversation, fortunately, and you were able to keep us on track. So thank you to all involved. I really appreciate it. And to all the advocates, I see our friend Jane Lyons is here. Jane, as a fellow at the council, did a study last summer that helped initiate this conversation, and now you're with the Coalition for Smarter Growth, and I think you're here representing a broad coalition of community advocates. John Poxtis, thank you so much for your contributions. Thanks to everybody for your support.
Thank you. Councilman Albornoz.
Thank you, colleagues. I do want to thank everybody for the thoughtful deliberation we've had for a number of months at this point. As my colleagues know, I had reservations about this bill, and I have lived in the county my entire life, as many of you on this dais have as well, and so we've sort of certainly seen the evolution of the county in a variety of different ways. And this particular issue brought to bear and brought to light many of the issues we know about, quality of life challenges, parking challenges, traffic challenges that come with being a jurisdiction so close to the capital of the free world. I think that we have, while not perfect in my opinion, I do believe that the pros do outweigh the cons in terms of what we've been able to put forward. I believe we've been able to reasonably address a number of the reasonable issues that have been brought forward to our attention with regards to concerns about infrastructure and privacy. So I do believe this is an issue that, as we discussed in our last discussion on this issue, that we will revisit in terms of just analyzing to make sure that some of the concerns that were raised by residents don't come to fruition, and that we continue to do this in a thoughtful manner. But I'm proud to stand next to my colleagues, and I do believe on the whole this bill does advance and move us in a direction that I think is necessary given the growing challenges and needs within our community, and that we've done our best to do this in a manner that's reasonable and responsible.
Thank you so much. Okay, so now we're on to item 3B. This is action on zoning text amendment 19-05, industrial zones, landscape contractors. Fed committee recommends approval as amended. Councilmember Reamer.
Okay, we are moving on to the next item. I will just catch our breath, and then those who may wish to not join us for this next item. This next item is a zoning text amendment that was introduced by lead sponsors Councilmember Hucker and Council Vice President Katz, co-sponsored by Councilmember Jawando, Council President Navarro. And it addresses a challenge similarly related to the cost of property, of land in the county, and the impact of the rising cost of land and its scarce availability on a type of business that is needed by everyone, or at least by many people who live in the county, whether they hire, I suppose, or do it themselves, and that is landscape contractors. So the purpose of the zoning change is to open up industrial property to landscape contractor use. Jeff, can you please give us a summary?
Sure. As introduced, this ZTA would have allowed landscape contractors as a permitted use both in the light industrial and heavy industrial zone. It's currently only allowed in the medium density industrial zone. So it certainly made sense to everybody in the committee that it should be permitted in the heavy industrial zone without any other conditions. There was concern about the light industrial zone where that abuts residential property. And in that case, you could have trucks and activity where it wasn't expected before. There are lighter industrial uses in what's allowed in light industrial. So this was a little bit above that scale. What the committee decided after hearing that there was about 20% of the properties in the light industrial zone that abutted single-family residential, it decided to require some screening for only those parcels that abut the residential zone. And that would take care of that 20% of the property and would allow that essentially as a permitted use within the 80% of the properties that do not abut that zone. So that was the amendment recommended by the committee, to make it a limited use with that condition for screening.
All right. And so we have a committee recommendation that is before the council, and Council President has asked for a roll call vote.
Mr. Glass?
Yes.
Mr. Glass votes yes. Mr. Jawando?
Yes.
Mr. Jawando votes yes. Mr. Hucker? Yes. Mr. Hucker votes yes. Mr. Reamer?
Yes.
Mr. Reamer votes yes. Mr. Albornoz?
Yes.
Mr. Albornoz votes yes. Mr. Rice?
Yes.
Mr. Rice votes yes. Mr. Friedson? Yes. Mr. Friedson votes yes. Mr. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Katz votes yes. Ms. Navarro? Yes. Ms. Navarro votes yes.
That is unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move on to item number 4, and this is confirmation of County Executive's appointee for the Office of Human Resources Director, Mr. Burke Attila. Can you join us? All right, so if you can join us on the table, we're going to first have the vote, and then we'll hear from you, Mr. Attila, if you have any other remarks. So I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I would just like to move that we confirm this person, Burke Attila, for the County Executive's appointee for the Office of Human Resource Director. We've looked at his resume. We've heard from him a couple times. I met with him privately. And I think that we need some change for human resources for Montgomery County. I don't think we do things as nearly as quickly as we can, and I believe that Burke has certainly heard us say that several times, and I believe he's someone that will bring the needed change that is necessary for us to make certain that we're being as efficient and effective as we possibly can. So I therefore move his appointment.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
I would like to second that and just appreciate the new approach that you're expecting to bring. Appreciate you and Mr. Klein's willingness to hear some of the questions that we had about how this would work, a somewhat unconventional pick for this role, but I think all of us are interested in seeing you in action, seeing your change agent nature, which is how you were described to us, and certainly we all on this council and certainly in the Government Operations Committee, where we have discussed extensively the opportunities in the Office of Human Resources to improve processes, to bring people on faster, to make sure that we're being responsive to our workforce, to allow them to be responsive to the residents of Montgomery County. So look forward to working with you and happy to second that motion.
Excellent. It's been moved by Councilmember Vice President Katz and seconded by Councilmember Friedson. I do have a light. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President. And Mr. Attila, unfortunately, I was not able to be here for the interview process. I was representing the council out of town, but did just want to say and echo what my colleague said. I am very anxious to see what efficiencies we can enact in terms of our Office of Human Resources. I do, however, want to ensure that we are still maintaining the core, which is to maintain that positive face. Office of Human Resources is not just about filling positions, but it's also about being the source of information, the source of resources for our workforce. And so when it comes to a wife who's trying to figure out how she can get assistance for making sure that she can take care of her children because her husband's no longer there because he's passed away, or whether it's making sure that parents can figure out how to get the needed resources for mental health for their child and navigating that system. Those kinds of things don't necessarily tie to efficiency, but are part of the core of what we do in terms of human resources, something in which I've seen we necessarily before haven't done as great of a job as we could. And so I'm looking forward to working with you and sharing the stories that I've heard from our constituency, our employees, about some of the challenges that they faced and how we can continue to make sure that we're addressing those to make it a seamless process for those to access those resources that are so important and due to them. So I congratulate you on your appointment and look forward to voting for you and look forward to working with you. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to pick up where my colleague, Councilmember Rice, left off, and that he and I were not here last week during the conversation you had with the council, but I was pleased to have met with you privately, and just want to reiterate that I look forward to working with you to make sure that while we need to increase the response time for our hiring processes, I want to make sure that our hiring processes are equitable as it relates to my first piece of legislation, the Montgomery County Pay Equity Act, which goes into effect in less than 2 weeks. And so you will be starting right when pay equity starts for all of our county employees, and look forward to working with you to make sure that process is smooth, and to get regular updates from you to make sure that a fair day's pay is for a fair day's work. Thank you.
All right, very good. So all those in favor of confirming the appointment of Mr. Berke Attila, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Congratulations. And Ms. Bluchinski, thank you so much for everything that you have done in your position as acting director. I know that you will continue to help us move along. And Mr. Attila, get to work because we have a lot to do. So I really do appreciate anything that you would like to add. You can press the button. Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to start working with you all.
Wonderful.
Very
Thank
excited.
you so much.
Thank you so
Mr.
much.
Thank you, Mr. Attila. Thank you so much. Yes. Yes. All right. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to item number 5. And this is an item that we did request as a council. So those of you who are here for this particular item, Ms. Farag, if you can invite those who are here to talk to us. I believe Acting Chief Jones, is everybody here? We have our Acting Police Chief, Marcus Jones. This is what's on my list. Assistant Chief David Anderson, Acting Assistant Chief Dinesh Patel, Acting Assistant Chief Paul Licori, Captain Sonia Pruitt, and Captain Jason Kukinos. So if you're here, please join us. Good morning, everybody. All right, so this briefing was requested because we have come to a point where we, as a legislative body, need to work with our partners in law enforcement to examine what underlying conditions led to the particular incidents in Aspen Hill and White Oak, and how we can all work together to reestablish trust between members of law enforcement and communities that you serve. I want to make something very clear, though. The point of today's discussion is not to simply go on record airing our grievances about our fine police department. Rather, today is meant to bring about productive, thoughtful dialogue surrounding community policing practices in Montgomery County and how we, as a county, can improve. I think I speak for everyone when I said that we value the partnership between the council and the Montgomery County Police Department, and we welcome your input as support as we strive to make our county better. While I do understand that our police are some of the best in the country, and our policies and programs are seen as models by many other agencies, we also cannot pretend that we cannot improve. I should also mention that it is my intention to introduce legislation this fall, working with my colleagues, Councilmember Rice, and we've had this conversation, Councilmember Joanno has expressed interest, to establish a more recognizable definition of community policing, as we cannot seem to pin down in a short blurb what exactly it is that we're talking about. Everyone has a slightly different idea as to what community policing means, and it is time that we all get on the exact same page and go from there. It is my hope to use this legislation as an opportunity to frame future discussions on community policing and create a more concrete structure to guide MCPD's efforts. Montgomery County is changing, and we need to make sure that our institutions are properly equipped to cope with today's new paradigm. Once again, I welcome everyone attending today. I want to acknowledge that we do have the leadership of our Fraternal Order of Police here as well. I see Mr. Cook and Mr. Holland. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being part of this dialogue. I do look forward to today's dialogue, and before we hear from you, let me turn it over to the chair of our Public Safety Committee, Council Vice President Katz.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you all for being here today. I think we saw each other a couple weeks ago when you appeared before the Public Safety Committee and on a very similar topic to give us an update on what we're doing for community involvement and for community policing in a variety of ways in Montgomery County, and we do a lot. I have a feeling that Chief Jones is going to mention, I guess, with 1,200. I don't know if he's going to mention each one, but I think it was 1,200 different contacts that our police department has with the community in general. Community policing, as the council president said, does have different meanings to different people, and I think we need to literally nail down what we consider the definition to be. Not that it shouldn't be flexible, but what the definition should be. When Montgomery County was a smaller place, community policing was pretty much done by nature. It was everybody, you knew the police officers who were in your neighborhood or in your area. Not that everybody walked a beat, because they didn't walk beats in Montgomery County, maybe in the urban areas, but certainly not in the country, in the more suburban areas in the country where I grew up. But I can tell you that the police department in Montgomery County has, and has always been a sense of pride. That doesn't mean we don't have every now and then some issue that we are very concerned about, and I know the police department themselves are very concerned about when those issues take place. But in general, the 1,300 sworn officers that we have in our community do a marvelous job. They risk their lives for each of us. Many times it's for people they do not know. They risk their lives to make certain that our lives are safe. And for that, I don't think that should get lost at all in any of our discussions. We're very proud of what you do, and I thank you for what you do. And I know that at the end of this discussion, I might have a few other questions, but I do thank you.
Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President, and I look forward to working with you to make sure that we draft some legislation that codifies some of our current practice when it comes to community policing and builds on that in terms of best practices that we can continue to enact to make sure that we're addressing the needs and the changing landscape of our community. Let me just say, as a person who was born and raised here, who's seen the evolution of our police department, we've come a long way. I still remember, like it was yesterday, as I was driving home from Herman Sporting Goods from Rockville, and I was riding down Randolph Road, and I was driving my mother's car, Volvo 240, and wasn't speeding, and cop lights came on behind me, and I pulled over like I was supposed to, and the officer came out and asked for my license and registration, which I provided, and then asked me why I had a pager. My pager was on the visor, and pagers were a cool thing to have. And I was fortunate enough to be an only child whose parents pretty much gave me a lot of what I wanted, plus I worked so I could have it. And I said, why does it matter whether or not I have a pager? I'm not a drug dealer or something. That was pretty much my response. And the officer said, well, you know, we've had some reports of stolen vehicles. I said, this is my mother's car. And we had a little back and forth, and I was upset. And when I got home, I was so upset that I started crying, and I told my mother what had happened. And my mother and I got in her car and went down to the Glenmont police station and filed a report because we felt as though what had happened was a violation, not just a violation of what our practice is, but a violation of community trust. I can say today that while there may be some of those instances that continue to happen, our police force is very different from that police force that was there then. I've seen it. As I live in this community, I talk to people. I know people who have had interactions that unfortunately have been similar to the ones that I've had. However, the preponderance of those are not that any longer. The changes that we have made have been significant, ones in which I can say as a person who was pulled over, as a person who has been profiled before, not just by police. This happens in our society. People know about the story I tell about my own grocery store at Giant, in which I was asked by a security personnel whether or not I paid for goods because I used the scanner that Giant wants everybody to use to save on checkout time and checkout speed. These things still happen. And this is while you're a sitting council member. Your title, the money in your pocket, right? None of that has any protection from some people who are still prejudiced and who still feel that they need to pigeonhole you in a certain way. We can see that from our president, who continues with the conversations that continue to stoke those kinds of flames and make people think that that's acceptable. And it would be unwise of us to assume that there is not a single person who has made it on the force who may not feel that same way. It's unrealistic, and I feel that it's dangerous. But what we can do is ensure that the practices that we have are there that ensure that the majority of our police force, the majority of our community, can operate in a way in which that trust is still there. I have built a trust with my police officers. I know that with my local commanders and with my local leaders in our police department, we work together, and when there are instances where we feel as though officers are not acting as they should, those officers are no longer on the force. I can point to specific examples. This is why I think our force is working. We have Germantown Park, which is a troubled neighborhood in my district, who's continued to have challenges. They are begging for our police to come in and lock people up. This is from the community, so I want to be very clear that I want to make sure that folks understand that there are neighborhoods out there that feel that they are under siege and want to have our police there. This community policing model is one that is not just about just having conversations with people. It is about protecting people. Those residents also deserve to have a quality of life that is similar to those that are in neighborhoods who don't have the same scourges of gun violence and drugs in their community. Their voices matter too. And I cannot say that we can just say with carte blanche, we're just saying we're just going to talk to people and we're not going to actually prosecute folks who are committing crimes and holding our neighborhoods hostage. Because that's what some of our residents feel. We have to achieve a balance. That is what true community policing is about. And so I just wanted to say that because I know that there's a lot of conversations going out there about race, about people being stopped, about what it means to lock folks up. I'm going to tell you, as a black man who grew up here, who has parents in the South who had all of the experiences of racism, who grew up as a young child in Montgomery County Public Schools, who had kids call him Oreo because I didn't talk like the other black kids. I've seen it and experienced it all. Every single bit of it. And I can tell you right now that I, as a 46-year-old man who's been here, trust and value my police department. I trust and value our leadership. I think that we've taken us a long way. Do we need to go further? Yes. But I think that we've done a great deal of justice for our community, and we can build on that by working on some of the things that we're talking about here today. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. So we'll turn it over to you, Mr. Chief Jones, to kick us off in this conversation, and then we'll have some questions.
Absolutely. So good morning to everyone. I know that there has been a tremendous amount of concern, particularly in light of the two incidents that we've had recently that have gained much attention in our community. And again, those incidents have given this police department, this police administration, a lot of, when I say pause, it really is aggravation and disappointment on our performance. Because when it does, we look at the trust of our department in our community, that goes a very long way for me. We've worked very hard to try to earn people's trust, and I know in policing in America today and in this county, we still have a long ways to go for many communities. And I just want to kind of focus a little bit this morning on some community policing efforts, and I appreciate Council President Navarro noting the differences in definition as it relates to community policing, because there are many of that does exist, and many people have different perceptions and realities of what community policing actually is. But the one thing I wanted to share with you all is how we look at community policing, and we are here this morning to answer those things that impact policing efforts across this county in many facets. Community policing is a philosophy that has to be constantly embedded in our department, and it needs to be enhanced to eliminate misunderstandings of how it is defined. There are three components of community policing, and those are community partnerships, organizational transformation, and problem solving. This department has been at the forefront of these components as defined. In 2019, as Mr. Katz noted, we gave him the numbers of 1,200 recorded events back in, I think, early June. We're up to 1,395 events that have occurred this far this year. We have improved upon our recordation of these events as we began tracking them in late 2016. When I look at our department and how it's organized, you have 6 district stations, and out of those 6 district stations, you have community service officers who are assigned to each of those stations. And in fact, one of the stations, the 3rd district, actually has 2 community service officers, something that we look upon expanding in order to have better engagements in our communities. I would also note that even within that, we have other units that, when we look at our deployment of our officers out in the street, we have districts that are what we call deployed in the B team segment. Those particular districts have units that work the same areas, they work the same shift, they're permanent shifts, so therefore that is designed from a community policing model in order to be able to know the issues and the people that in which they serve every single day. And those are our day, evening, and even midnight shifts. We also have traditional stations such as the Rockville District, the 1st District, the Bethesda District, and the 5th District in Germantown. Those are not set up in B-team concepts, but we do have units that work in those units, such as the Central Business District teams for some of those districts. And we also have our DCAT teams that work in community efforts. We have the Community Engagement Division that is focused on our community efforts, as well as other units that we work forward to. When I look at, again, many of the issues that, when we talk about some of these community policing highlights of things that we do, I just want to highlight not 1,300 of our events, but I want to highlight just a few. And I want to show where our officers who have been involved in our community for quite some time, some of the types of programs that they set up. I want to highlight the 2nd District of Officer Dana Stroman, who's the CSO there, who actually has senior citizen movie days at Montgomery Mall each month, that she brings in the senior citizens and connects with them. And when she does that, she talks about safety issues that impact the senior community. I also want to talk about the Game Changers annual conference designed for young people of color. That is a great program that is put on by Omega Psi Phi fraternity. We have participated with that group for the past 12 years of officers such as Officer P.J. Gregory, Lieutenant Ruben Rosario, Lieutenant Mike Rain, Detective Mark Frazier. These are people who take their own time on a Saturday every year to go talk to young people about police engagement and to talk about interacting with police officers, providing them good tips. I also talk about mentoring in the 3rd District, and Officer George Stevens, who connected with a 5th grade class at a elementary school, Burtonsville Elementary School. And Officer Stevens gathered about 4 or 5 of us, and myself included, Officer Anna Hester, Officer Willie Taft, and Captain William Montgomery, to go mentor a group of high-risk students identified by their teacher. Not only did we do it in the year that they were in the 5th grade, but we followed them to the Banneker Middle School. And we still continue to mentor those kids to this day. And we'll be following them as they go into the 7th grade next year. These, again, are things that we do on our own time, not so much designated as a part of a job responsibility that's given to by any supervisor. We do the police adventure camp in the 1st District. Officer Mike Prather has been doing this program in the Twinbrook community for 12 consecutive years. A police program that we do, again, with high-risk students, that is very welcomed by their parents, that gives them something to do during the summer, and it has a great deal of connections with our community. We also do, we had put together a LGBTQ community group that Chief Manger had started and had gone through 2018. Captain Nick Augustine is still committed to keeping that group together to talk about these types of issues in our community and our police relationships with this particular community, which I think is vitally important to the safety of that community and for us to continue to have these discussions. As a member of the African American community, I have been aware and engaged with issues surrounding interactions of our residents with Montgomery County Police for 33 years. When it comes to accusations of racial profiling, I can tell you this issue has been identified and constantly addressed dating back to the early 90s. As a prior president of the Coalition of Black Police Officers, I testified before the County Council in 1994. With then President of the Council, Ike Leggett, to discuss this issue in a public hearing. We clearly understand the trust issues here. I believe there is a road to healing, and it starts with working with individuals and communities to gain trust. We must develop relationships in order to achieve this goal. I have several plans that I will begin to implement immediately to address these problems. One is to strengthen and enhance our community policing policies and practices. I am working to improve our community policing philosophy with an emphasis on addressing racial equity with our community members. We will improve upon current implicit bias and cultural sensitivity training. This training must be continuous for our officers to have clear understanding of others and how their behavior affects the community. Communication is the key for us to better understand in this community regarding police interactions and having courageous conversations with those who trust us the least and for all of our residents. I understand these issues surrounding our youth, our senior citizens, our community as a whole, and in particular, our communities of color. We have to be open to having these discussions with our residents and to hear from them and why they feel afraid or feel disenfranchised. The transparency and accountability are key factors by our department to begin the discussions and communications with those engaged in police community relations. We have experience of addressing public safety and crime issues in minority communities, and they have been solved utilizing compassionate policing and treating even the offenders with the respect while making community members feel safe in their homes and communities again. We continue to recognize the immigration issues that we are confronted with in the community as County Executive Elrich and members of the council outlined yesterday. This department has empathy for immigrant communities that live in fear of ICE and the police for many reasons. We continue to work with those communities to develop partnerships and mutual trust that will allow us to protect them and provide services without fear. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chief Jones. So I really appreciate those comments. I want to say that it is not lost on me that, Montgomery County is definitely a microcosm of the country, and I would venture to say the world. And so when you talk about, in 1994 having former County Executive Leggett here as council president, and there were many issues that were being addressed at that time, there is no doubt that now we are dealing with a much more expansive set of circumstances and issues and dynamics. And this is the primary reason why it was so important to for this council to begin this work on racial equity and social justice, because the bottom line is that in order for us to continue to have a safe county, we are going to have to look at what we're doing to structurally address that, right? And this notion of, what community policing really means, as I said earlier, can have a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different perceptions. And so it is absolutely imperative because, I think for us legislators, it's really tough. We're so proud of our police department, and every year we look at our budgets and we do whatever we can, and we seek to, enhance and assist. Also, though, as a resident, and so, everybody puts their personal, I think, lens on, right? So for me as an immigrant, for a mother of black daughters, knowing that when they see videos like the ones that they had to see that would happen, the incident, for example, in the McDonald's in White Oak, it is very difficult to not feel this sense of helplessness sometimes of what this means for us in this county that we love so much. And so I just want to express not only what our African American, our black community feels, but, of course, what our immigrant community feels, and all of those layers that come into play, and the helplessness that many of us out there in these communities feel when we see these kinds of incidents, because right now, the national level, there's so many things happening that we cannot control, but we know we can control what we do here in our county. So I appreciate the fact that you have described some of the things that you've done so far, and you alluded to, some of the things that you would like to put into place. I will acknowledge that it's not simple, and like I said, as we've been doing this racial equity and social justice work, it is not simple. There is not one, silver bullet there to address a lot of these issues. But can you just share very briefly what are some of the things you're looking at? What are some of the things, best practices, taking stock of where we are right now, other than, the different activities that you described? What are some of those things that you believe really do need to be put into place so that we can move forward in a positive and constructive manner?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I think is it's when we talk about race in America, for example, the one thing that I know that I think is most difficult for people in general, and it has nothing to do with law enforcement, simply, is the fact that people don't like to have the conversation. They don't like to have the courageous conversation of really kind of, sitting across from each other and really talking about why people feel the way they do and the things that are done by others that have impact on their lives. And then when you take it to policing, it takes it to a different level, right? When we look at the history of policing in America, you could even say the history of policing in Montgomery County, there are negative stories all throughout history, right? And I'm not lost upon that. One of the models that I think that is phenomenal that I would look to emulate is the Charleston Illumination Project. The Charleston Illumination Project is a model that basically brings the community, that is led by the community, but it is in partnership with the police department. And it is to bring together and come up with a strategic plan to actually bring people together in small groups, not just at the top of police administration of individuals having these conversations, but the actual officers, the boots on the ground, you might say, to have those interactions with them. And these are the officers that work in those communities that they're talking to those individuals. That, I think, it's an excellent model for us to follow. There's much more to it. I could speak probably for 2 hours to it, but I've talked to really the executive director who's running that model in Charleston, as well as a pastor who's really doing some phenomenal work in leading that model in the community, and it has bridged the gap, you might say, in their relationship building. So, and for us to have a successful community policing model, there has to be relationship building in this county with our citizens in order to be able to break down these barriers, misperceptions on both parts. If we're not listening to each other, if we're not talking to each other in a way that's respectable, I think that's a problem, and we're not going to get to the goal which it needs to be set. So if that's the one model that I would say I would lead with, I would start with that. I would also state to you all that I have already committed to starting a working group within our agency to look at better practices for us for community engagement. That's going to be led by Assistant Chief LaCory, who oversees our Patrol Services Bureau. That would also include Captain Pruitt in our Community Engagement Division and all 6 of our police commanders. And we'll look to add others to this because when we look at what else do we partner, who else do we partner with, right? We partner with Health and Human Services. We partner with the Department of Recreation to do a lot of these types of activities, even, from a standpoint that's impactful in our communities. When we look at crime issues, when we look at issues that are going on in our neighborhoods, and particularly like if we're looking at our youth, for example, when we look at some of the issues that are underlying, that's the root cause of really why are people committing these crimes, or are our kids getting involved in these types of acts. There are other things that the police department has no control over that's impacting that. How can we be more on the preventative end, on the front side of that, than at the end of it when arrests have to be made, right? And when there might be a negative impact of people in that community being crime victims. That's what we're trying to avoid. That's where we need to be. And so, yes, there's a greater sense of how can we be better. It's no doubt in my mind, I would agree with all of you. We can be better at what we do. And we do have a good police department. But I stressed to our command staff just this morning about the improvement, having a vision within your own districts to see what's out there and what are the needs.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I think that you will no doubt know and affirm that this council that I've been a part of for a while has always has made a lot of inroads in making sure that we have prevention and that we have collaboration with the different agencies, precisely because we understand this issue of root causes and how it is incumbent upon all of us to work to avoid many of the things we're seeing. So I really appreciate the fact that I know you have been a key player in ensuring that we always look towards prevention. I'm going to turn over first to the chair of the Public Safety Committee, and then I'll go down the line of lights.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And thank you again, Chief, for reminding us once again, and we applaud certainly the various community engagements that you've been involved with. I've personally seen many of them. A couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, I guess, I was at a community event, and the police and the young people were having a wonderful time, enjoying each other and having good discussions. So it's always good to see that. I was reminded while you were speaking, when I was mayor a couple of years ago, several years ago now, a person who's very active in the immigrant community had called me and said that she was concerned that there was a neighborhood that was not in Gaithersburg, that was just outside it, that the people felt unsafe, that there had been someone that had been murdered next to where they lived, and they were very, very concerned, but they were afraid to come to the school to have a discussion. I don't know if you were there or not, Marcus, but they wanted to come to a school to have the discussion. I see some head shaking in the audience because they remember where we were. And they knew me, and they trusted me, but they didn't necessarily trust the police. And she asked if I would come, and I did. And we had a good discussion. I did know several people who were there and who were concerned. And once they got that initial conversation going, once I was able to literally break the ice with the community, they then started having a much better dialogue and feeling much more comfortable around the police officers. And since that time, to my memory, they've had issues, but they have not had anywhere near the issues that they've had. And my point on that memory was the fact that many times people are afraid of police officers because from the countries that they come from, the police officers are not someone that they can necessarily trust, and it's someone that they necessarily need to be able to trust in this country to keep themselves safe. And so I applaud everyone for doing it the way that you all have done it. And to the council president's point about the prevention side, years ago, and I know some of you were on this committee too, that years ago we had a task force in Montgomery County and Prince George's County on gang involvement. And we, out of that task force, came up with the idea that there needs to be prevention, intervention, and suppression. And suppression being an arrest and incarcerating or whatever is necessary to do to that person. But that the prevention and the intervention were the most important parts of it. We could not arrest, and we did not arrest, our way out of a problem. We needed to make certain that how we prevented was something that, in that case, most people were young people, that they would actually be engaged, and that this was a way to engage them. And I always used to talk about that if we bought all the ping pong tables in the world because we wanted to make certain that people had something to do, or young people had something to do, and our young people didn't want to play ping pong, we might have had a good heart about it, but we didn't do anything. We might have meant to do well, but we didn't. And so we had to have those continued dialogues. We had to engage our nonprofit community, which I know that all of you have been engaged in directly over the years, not just recently. And so that's exactly what we need to continue to do, and need to continue to do it and more and more. This morning I received an email that wanted to make certain that there was a clarity about community policing, that it's not what they called feel-good community events, but full-service personalized policing where the same officer patrols and works in the same area on a permanent basis from a decentralized place, working in a proactive partnership with citizens to identify and solve problems. And I believe, Chief, you did touch on that, but I wanted to make certain that we were clear on what you were saying when you discussed that. Could you please talk about that a little bit more?
Absolutely, and I think what's important to understand is that that our officers, when I described a little bit about deployment and them working in the areas, that are permanent, that they are aware of the issues that are occurring in their particular areas in which they work and the problems that they solve. I could have acting chief, assistant chief, Paul LaCourie kind of give maybe one example of a district that has a community problem, from a standpoint that needs to be solved, and how those officers actually work with that community to actually solve that particular problem.
Thank you and good morning. So in each of our districts, community policing and problem-oriented policing is something that is occurring and it continues to occur. Each of the district commanders reports out about their problem-oriented policing, and we're expanding that model during our weekly MCP stat models, and we're also embracing the turn the curve model that is coming from the chief administrative officer as well. And one of the examples I'd like to highlight is that in an apartment complex in Gaithersburg, we were receiving multiple complaints from the residents there about quality of life issues. In that complex, there were 196 calls for service, with 107 of them concentrated in a small block of that apartment complex. Using a community policing philosophy, they met with both the manager of the complex as well as board members from the apartment complex and residents to identify where the problems were. One of the problems that they were able to identify were that there were several apartments that were not properly secured, allowing for young people to use them as trap places or hangouts where they could go in and do underage drinking and possibly smoking marijuana and other activities. Working with the board members and the management there, they were able to secure those. Then the police, along with management, then gave them access to patrol some of the more common areas as well, to make sure that that behavior wasn't spilling out into some of those other areas. Partnering with both the residents, as I said, the management, the Gaithersburg City Police Department, we had concentrated patrols, therefore, and that the number of calls for service dramatically reduced. I think we see these types of partnerships regardless with both the community as well as multidisciplined teams, and we've seen that with PYDI, Positive Youth Development, or with our STEER program and opioid reductions, that as we move forward and under what Chief Jones has requested of us, is to enhance our community policing, is to make those multidisciplinary partnerships and making those partnerships with multiple entities within the community so that we can reduce either the fear of crime or actual crime that is going on into those segments of the community.
And thank you. And you know, you bring back other memories. I remember when we had issues in Gaithersburg as well, and we actually put a substation in one of those areas that was causing all these concerns. And not only did it solve the crime issue, but it certainly brought back that the young people, especially, were very, very comfortable with the police officers. So it made it even a much more pleasant area for them to be living in, for the police officers to be working in. And I do believe that actually some of those young people became officers as well over time. That convinced them. Chief, I'm going to, on the whole idea for the CALEA accreditation, and I had to look it up because CALEA stands for, and I'm reading it, Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies Incorporated. But for the whole issue that for CALEA accreditation, which meets national standards, and I know Air Police Forces has met those standards and best practices for several years now. Did you want to touch at all on those best practices and what they mean to you and to a community?
Yes, and thank you for that. I think, you know, CALEA does look at all of our policies across the board when they do our CALEA inspections, that we get accredited as a recognized national law enforcement agency that is doing things well, and that they can highlight areas where we might be deficient in any area of policy, whether it's training or of the like, that really needs to be addressed. So if we look at sort of minimum standards, and I'll give you an example sort of where our training is, well, we fall under the Maryland Police and Correctional Training Commission that requires us annually to do certifications for all of our officers. It basically drives our recruit training of what are the minimum standards that's required by our recruits to be a certified police officer. CALEA looks at those, but it also goes well above. For example, when we look at some of our training where it's bias-based policing, that may not necessarily be a requirement by the Training Commission, but that CALEA says that they want to see that done biannually, so that we're doing it every 2 years at the minimum. Now, it doesn't mean we can't go above that, but they're basically wanting to make sure that this is a standard that's across America, that by that commission that's what they require. They look at things like mental illness. They look at ethics. They look at other things as it relates to the use of force policy. Those things that, again, that can be expanded when you look at your entire policy and planning manual that they go and review. Not only do they review it, but they actually, when they do their inspections, they come in to make sure that we have the documentation to prove that we've been doing it, and that it's actually that we're actually doing what we're saying we're doing as it relates to our policy, that's consistent. And if there's any discrepancy, they will note that in our inspection during that period of time.
Thank you. And I know that Air Force has actually gone out and taught other agencies about what we do for those who have mental illness and what we do for those who are autistic, and that list goes on. I mean, we've made literally national news and should how good we are at what we do on that. I know that for de-escalation, that our use of force does not explicitly address the mandatory de-escalation of a situation. Did you want to touch on that as well, please? I'll stop in a second. Yeah, okay.
Yes, I do. So one thing to be clear, we have our use of force policy that I think that was shared amongst all the council members. In our use of force policy, it highlights the levels of force and how it's identified and how it gives the parameters for those officers of the amount of force that they are allowed to use in certain situations. The one thing that I want to make sure that is important is that all of our training that we conduct with our police training academy is a part of our policy. It may not be written explicitly in the policy. The one thing I will tell you all is that I am directing, we are in the process of revising our use of force policy. We just revised it, I think, back in 2016, and I've decided that we need to do another review of that. So we're in the process of doing that right now. But when we talk about deconfliction being mandatory, I think there's a little bit of a danger for us to look at the term mandatory, because there are situations that don't necessarily may not be a de-escalation situation. And I will give a highlight, and it's the most heinous of highlights to be shared, but I think it's a reality in our environment today. So a school shooting, let's say, as an example, that we're responding to an active shooter. And that at the end of the day, that by the time we arrive at this school, that there are children and staff that have already been shot and hopefully not killed, but let's say they've been shot. At that point in time, the officer is not going to, he has to, or she has to stop that threat. There's no de-escalation that's going to be a part of that process. So there are sort of exceptions to the rule, if you might state. Is it highly, what we would suggest is, in those cases, are cases that we have issues that could be de-escalated, that we highly recommend, and we train in all facets of our training. We try to emphasize this to our officers to be able to implement this in everyday work. But that's just an example that I would say that would exclude it from being a mandatory de-escalation.
Well, thank you very much, and the council president is right. I've actually taken more time than I should have on this, but of course I, like you, could speak for hours about this as well. But just the one idea that you had mentioned earlier about that the ideas that you have and the suggestions that you wanted to have about community policing, that's going to take a lot of resources, and I know that's going to take more resources than what this council has given over the years. I mean, in order for us to do this properly, we need to give you the proper personnel and the proper tools to do it. So, not that I'm asking you to comment, but just please do not be bashful in asking for those resources, because I sincerely believe that this council and this county executive want to make certain that our community and our community policing is the best in America, and the way that we're going to do it is by doing it properly and to have the proper resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you all for being here this morning, and for the information. A couple of questions, and I'll be quick because I know others want to speak. On May 14th, I drafted a letter, and all my colleagues signed on to the then acting Chief Hamill asking about the White Oak incident where the young men were detained and issued trespass orders, and where you had the racial epithet used in conversation. We asked for a number of things. Release of all the body camera footage, which did happen on July 10th or that week. Release of a recording for any calls of service related to that specific stop from the sergeant or from any non-police entity. There was no call for service, correct?
That is correct. That was a self-initiated call. Okay. Right.
Using the agency agreement that the department had with that McDonald's.
Well, I would first state that was a part of it in the end, but I would first state that first it was a self-initiated act on the part of the sergeant.
Got it. Right. Thank you. So there was no call for service. Okay. And then we also asked for a release of a list of locations where Montgomery County Police act as an agent for property owners, where they're authorized by property owners to cite individuals for trespassing. And you did give us that list. It was a large list, but we did receive that. Thank you. I also asked for the demographic and geographic statistics of every resident stopped and cited for trespassing in the last 2 years. You explained to me in a private briefing, but I think the public needs to hear that information is not available, you're not able to track that information or know how many, the demographics of the people who have been issued trespass orders. Is that correct?
Correct. So we don't have a tracking mechanism for individuals that have been stopped and detained or are given trespass warnings, notices from that standpoint.
And I express to you, and I just want to allow you to expound on that. I think that's important information to have so we can improve performance and know if there's disparate action happening. Would you agree with that?
I would agree.
The steps you want to take to improve that?
I would agree, and I would suggest that we would need more resources to be able to do that. Okay. I don't think it's a bad thing for us to be able to capture that. I think it's a really, that would be important for us to look at data like that, not just in that particular situation, but there's lots of other data sets that we have that relate to where people have questions about what we do and how we do it. And currently I will tell you we just don't have the staff, and not that we couldn't set that kind of data sets up, but I think we would need more resources as it relates to that.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, and that's something I think when the public asks questions, when we have questions, that's something we need to know so that we know that policing is happening to everybody in the same way. A couple of things overall. You listed in the community policing packet the three components of community partnership, organizational transformation, and problem solving. And you listed the units within MCPD that are involved, and there's quite a few, the DCAT teams and everything. I noticed patrol is not mentioned as an overall unit that is engaged in community policing. And I bring that up, and I'm going to give you a chance to respond, because my colleagues and I have seen handouts from, I think it was the 2nd District, which I'm not, Mr. LaCourrier, I think you were the 2nd District Commander before you being promoted, that had a overweight police officer with a donut in his hand next to a chart of high-performing, quote-unquote, high-performing officers that had achieved a high number of arrests. And it had the super fit kind of Superman officer next, the super fit officer was next to the high number of arrests, and the overweight donut eating officer was next to the low number of arrests. And that was passed out either in the 2nd District, I don't know if it was roll call or not, as I guess as an incentive or a motivator for officers. And I'm concerned when you have that type of incentive and patrols not listed on the community policing unit, what message we're sending to officers, and are we just doing statistics-based policing? I'd like you to respond to that.
So, first of all, I would say we're not doing statistical-led policing, and I'll get into more detail about that. As I noted just here earlier, that all 6 district stations are actively involved in community policing efforts. And so, although it may not have been shown on the slide, I would tell you the way we designed that was more or less about the extension of our community-led policing efforts. So when you have 6 different stations that are led by commanders, and we have community service officers who are sort of the liaison between the community and our patrol officers to do community events and to connect with communities. And I'll give you an example. Just last week, the 3rd District in Silver Spring went to the Galway Elementary School summer camp that was led I
think I was there at the same time.
Right. Yeah. So again, our patrol officers are then connected with the community service officer to actually go and do such an event. And our patrol officers often get tasked with those type of events all throughout the districts, day and evening. So they are a part of that. So as it relates more, right, so I know we've had this discussion, you and I, about sort of the how officers are rated, right, when we talk about stats. Again, I want to make it clear to the public that we don't have quotas for our officers, right? We don't go out and say you have to make X amount of arrests this month. You have to write X amount of tickets. That's been forbidden by our collective bargaining agreement for longer than I've been a police officer. That was not a part of what we do. Do we keep statistical data on our police officers and what they do? The answer is absolutely yes, because we have to know what our officers are doing. I'll give an example of, we know, for example, in the Bethesda district, 2nd district, where we have the most restaurants per capita for in our county, but also I think in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, they lead from that perspective. But at the same time, we know that we have issues with drunk driving in our community. In fact, I just got a stat this morning that our fatal drunk driving crashes are up 38% this year. And so the expectation is for us to maintain a safe community. But when I have an officer who works on the midnight shift who had 0 DUI arrests for an entire rating period, that I deem to be a problem. I don't think our community expects our officers not to be really proactive in that regard. And so with that being said, there are expectations, from that aspect.
Sure, and that's an extreme example. I get that. You don't want someone doing nothing on the job and you expect them to have some arrests. I just think when we don't list patrol in the document, I just want to make sure that that's embedded in all the.
It is absolutely embedded in the process.
Problem-oriented policing that was discussed, wasn't that at one time included in officer rankings for promotion?
No,
it was not.
For promotion? No.
Or in their ratings, let me just
in their ratings, yes, absolutely.
Is it currently included?
It is currently still in some of the ratings, which again needs to be revised. Okay. This is something that we've been trying to work on for several years now. Our annual rating proficiency for our officers to be able to identify those things which they do. But there's a larger narrative, right, that goes into those ratings. Those are specific objectives and expectations, but there's also that we expect our supervisors to highlight the work that these officers are doing in their communities as well. That's an important factor.
And I think my point there is that if we're tracking all these other things, which we should track, we need to know that information. Sure. We also should be tracking what folks are doing in the community, and we should assign value to that.
Oh, absolutely.
And that should be, if we're talking about how we engage the community, and my understanding was that problem-oriented policing was no longer included in the rankings, but you cleared that up for me saying it is.
Right.
Okay. And just a couple more questions. The White Oak incident, back to that, no one was called. The sergeant, I reviewed the body camera footage. The sergeant did not have his body camera on when he initially encountered the young man. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In violation of policy?
Yes, that's correct.
That is when if racial profiling is going to happen, it's going to happen when he approaches somebody, right? Would you agree with that?
I would agree. Absolutely.
Okay, so it's a problem then that we didn't have that footage and we just had to go based on the officer's report.
Well, if I would remind you, Councilman Jawando, and I agree with you. I mean, the policy is correct. We should have our cameras on. But in policing in general, the reality is that that officers have always written reports and documented information about what they've done and gone and testified in court without anybody worn camera footage.
No, I agree.
Right?
I'm just saying it's part of the record for sure, and I'm not questioning.
Sure.
I'm not saying the sergeant was
absolutely,
but it would have been nice to have.
Trust me, it would have been nice. Sure, absolutely, it would have been. Yes.
Later in the footage, he tells the lieutenant on the scene that he's, quote, been seeing these guys popping around the neighborhood, and he wanted to get pictures of them to keep an eye on them, to have them on file. We know that one of the men was known. He was an older gentleman who had been dealing drugs and had an interaction with someone. The other young men were standing off to the side, had not been arrested or charged with anything in the past. Is that the policy that we want, if you see someone in a neighborhood hanging around, that you want to get pictures of them to keep an eye on them and track them? And again, these are not my words.
No, I don't know. There's not a policy for that. I mean, we don't have a policy we don't keep records on file. There is intelligence gathering that based upon it, depending upon what the information is for that particular investigatory stop, whether or not that might be a need, if there was a reason behind that's valid.
So you could see how I might be concerned. We don't have footage from the initial encounter. They were standing outside waiting to be picked up from work, which was actually confirmed by the older gentleman who had been charged. He said, "Why are they out here?" And he says on the camera, "Well, they're waiting to go to work." And he said, "Yeah, that's true."
Well, but there were other parts of that conversation that also noted that only one or two of them were going to get hired. Not everybody was being hired that day.
Right.
Right.
They might not pick up everybody. Day laborers, that's common. Everyone's
Correct.
waving. They might
Correct.
only need one or two, but you get out there because you need the opportunity. And so I think if we don't have that information and we have the sergeant saying, "I want to keep an eye on these guys," I think you can see, and I certainly have felt this way, I've grown up here my whole life, that people are literally standing out trying to go to a job, and you can understand why someone would feel harassed. I hope we could. If
I can understand it, but I also don't want it to be lost the fact of why also that Sergeant McDaniel noted that was the reality that we know that McDonald's has had problems with drug dealing and drug usage at that particular McDonald's.
Sure. And I live
and so when we look at the safety of our businesses and the safety of our community members who also patronize those businesses, I think that's an important part of that discussion.
I agree, and I live a mile from this McDonald's, and I understand the dynamics in the neighborhood. But we have to balance that again with people being able to live and exist in their own neighborhood.
Oh, I would agree.
Without feeling harassed or feeling policing different. And when we look at stats like the fact that over half of the people arrested and having use of force used against them in 2018 were people of color, were African American rather, and if you add Latino, you get over 75%. We need to ask. We need to know why that's happening. We need to know the circumstances. We need to dig into that data because it's not acceptable to allow that type of disparity to go on, and we don't know why.
So what I would then propose, Mr. Jawando, and I've had this discussion with my staff. I don't disagree with you, right? When you look at those numbers, they're troubling. There's part of the data that I've heard that when people say, well, then X amount of, then we look at the population here in Montgomery County of our minority community, and we look at those numbers. The one thing about that is a little bit flawed for the fact that outside there, we also arrest individuals that come from outside of Montgomery County.
Sure.
So we arrest people from Washington, D.C., from Prince George's County. I would highlight to you that the last big gun burglary case that we had in Rockville, all of those individuals who were all African American came from Anne Arundel County. So right. But my bigger point to this is that, yes, I agree with you. It needs to be looked at. I would suggest that we do an external audit. I have found companies that do this type of work in law enforcement, that they do an external audit to look at the arrest data and with people of color and what that looks like, our youth, all of those things, and what are the factors, what's behind that, what's connected to crime victims that these individuals are committing those offenses, and which ones are initiated by the police department.
And we talked about that. And I think
yes,
that's a great
absolutely
idea.
we did.
Yeah, and this is my last question. I know other people are waiting. In the Aspen Hill incident, we know the officer has been charged with second-degree assault, Officer Morris. Many have witnessed the video, and would you agree with me? It was shocking to see.
I've stated that publicly.
All right.
Yes.
I just wanted to confirm that. One of the things that was equally shocking to me, and I'd love to ask you about, is that when the knee goes down and the head hits the ground, no other officer reacts.
Mm-hmm.
And while I agree with you 100%, the officers on our police force, we have a great police force. I think I'm the only one up here that's actually worked at in the police force when I was an AmeriCorps intern 20 years ago. The fact that no one reacts, to me, speaks to either a fear or a culture problem that people are concerned or they don't want to get another officer in trouble. And I want to know, are you concerned with that as the first question? And second, is there a policy if you witness another officer committing a crime or violating policy, are they supposed to react or intervene, or other officers supposed to react and intervene?
So the first question, I would answer it this way. No, there's no policy that states that specifically, but it does concern me for the fact that I would think in fact, Assistant Chief Anderson and I, he has actually done some research to look at actually Police Executive Research Forum that has put out sort of these conditions in policing, and that's one of them where we're highlighting the fact of what is sort of a requirement by officers. What policies could we set in place to have officers actually have to report out when they see those sites as excessive force that should be brought to a supervisor's attention? So that is a concern of ours, and I'll let AC Anderson answer that much more in detail.
So good morning, Dave Anderson, Assistant Chief, Field Services Bureau. A couple of things. One is we're looking at a case with some criminal charges. And I think the other question that arises out of your point is, would a witness officer be criminally charged? I don't want to get too far into the case at hand because that is still under investigation. But I will tell you that I've had conversation with the prosecutor's office, and when you have an actual case or controversy, that's very important to be able to do the analysis and say who's going to be criminally charged and who would be criminally responsible that maybe didn't have a part in the act itself but didn't act to stop it. That's an ongoing conversation that we're having with the state's attorney's office. With that said, there's an administrative part of this as well. I believe it's Rule 16B that we have under Function Code 300, which you can find online. It talks about unsatisfactory performance and work standards. Arguably, it could be a work standards violation. Those are things that we would have to bring forward in a charging document. We are consulting with the county attorney right now about our existing rules and any potential need to clarify that rule. PERF did a recommended 30-item outline going back a couple of years. One of the recommendations from that group was effective to be a duty to report. And the duty to report, very simply put, is a knowingly standard.
Yeah.
If you know or should have known, then you should report.
I appreciate that, and that is a good standard. I'm glad you're looking into that, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you on that. On the resource question, certainly want to be supportive. I think we can get to a place where we're analyzing all this data, we're giving people trust, we're having accountability, and I know we can. This is a difficult moment, but I appreciate the candor and I appreciate the responses. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Hooker.
Thank you, Madam President. Thanks for being here, Chief, and everybody. I know we have a number of other speakers. We're going to move to the speed round, Chief. So I'll be brief here. Brief questions, brief answers. Really appreciate, though, your opening comments and Councilmember Rice's as well. We had a briefing in the Public Safety Committee on community policing in June, and at that time I requested you were going to send the performance evaluations that are used in the department now, the forms the supervisors complete, and the instructions and any information about the point system. Any mentions of community policing in MCP materials, any training materials regarding community policing, and the job description for police officers so we could see what it says about community policing and the approach to community policing in general. Any update on those requests?
We'll make sure that we get those to you. I thought that was already done, but we'll make sure we get those to you, Mr. Hooker. My apologies.
Thank you so much. A couple questions about the use of force policy. In Circle 22, an officer drawing a firearm in itself can be an escalating action. Are there other physical responses to potentially threatening situations aside from drawing a firearm available to an officer?
Chief Anderson, he's my expert. I'll let him answer.
I might be a little lost on your question. Can you repeat it one more time?
Well, Circle 22, Item 4, deals with firearms in the use of force policy. When you pull a firearm, that in itself can escalate an interaction, right? Are there other alternatives to to pulling a firearm that are available to an officer?
Oh, most certainly.
I think there are.
Oh,
can you elaborate?
Definitely. I could probably go on for much longer than you'd like. And let me just start by saying this. De-escalation can look like a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, if you read
our Function Code 131, electronic control weapons, taser, if you will. There is a school of thought, which has merit to it, that if you so much as just pull out the taser and cycle it so somebody knows, like, I've got a taser, and while you may not utilize it, that could get somebody's attention and de-escalate, right? A firearm at times may need to be drawn if somebody is not complying and you're in a situation where you may have to use deadly force. That also could get their attention and make them begin to de-escalate and comply. However, having said that, there are times when you have the firearm out, to your point, and if you believe it's not going to be potentially a deadly force situation and you holster, and then you're beginning to talk to somebody, you may transition to another instrument that we issue, be it taser, as previously mentioned, be it pepper spray, an asp baton, simply talking to someone. I would also say that de-escalation can take a lot of different faces and involve multiple officers. So if somebody's talking and that's just not working because Dave Anderson isn't the best person to convey the message, maybe we transition to somebody that has a better approach with folks. That, and so I can tell you that every day our officers do this. The hard part is we literally cannot showcase all those events. And I want you to really appreciate the fact that our 1,300 cops are out there doing these things, and we're going to try very hard to showcase more of them to the council and to the public so that you can see when we're doing it. And we want to incentivize in some way officers coming forward on their own saying, I saw my peer do this and I want it to be recognized, or I did it myself, which is, we don't really want lack of humility, but I think it's important at this stage in our evolution.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yes.
A few years ago in the Public Safety Committee, we had a briefing on the use of tasers. I think it was following a taser-involved fatality in Germantown. My understanding then, my fading memory, it was that there were going to be fewer tasers issued to officers at that time, and there was a new generation of less lethal tasers that were going to be coming from the manufacturer. Do you have any update on that?
I can tell you that we are constantly looking at the newest technology. So we have transitioned out of a series of models of taser, and they all have different upgrades. I could get you that information later, what the evolution looks like. But we did separate out that policy as a
Right.
separate function code. We have looked at that event and other events. We have placed very specific expectations on taser operators. But in terms of the numbers going down, I will tell you that when Taser came forward and issued an updated warning that this could result in fatalities, and we literally over a weekend brought in I think it was 400 operators in a 48-hour window and retrained them all. Some of those folks said, I don't like the idea of carrying an instrument that is supposed to be less lethal and have it be lethal, because that was not my intent.
Right.
So some operators turned that instrument in. Council President Navarro said it earlier, there are very few silver bullets that exist. And on this topic, I can tell you right now, the last thing a police officer wants to do is use an instrument that is less lethal and have it turn into a fatality. They do not want that.
Right, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yes.
Circle 23 is about gauge impact projectiles. How often does MCP use this type of gauge impact projectiles, under what circumstances, and have any suspects suffered serious bodily harm from the use of that force?
So the less lethal standard is pretty much across the board. I can tell you specifically as it relates to those projectiles, what we have in essence is a shotgun with an orange stock. It fires a beanbag round. There was an event that occurred, and I don't know the year, but I believe it was in Boston, where a young lady was struck in the head and killed. Again, I can tell you we had a lot of people turning those in. And here's the other point that I would say is we've had events across this country, whether it's taser or a less lethal instrument, where it looks or potentially feels the same as another weapon, our regular .870 shotgun, our handgun.
as compared to taser. These are things that officers have to drill and practice and have a comfort level with to feel like, you know, in a stressful situation, I will, number one, you pull out the right weapon, and number two, use it in a manner that I'm trained to. And sometimes, again, if the, you know, you don't have complete control over the situation, if that person has some kind of medical issue going on that you don't know about, and it's a, you know, a taser-related event or something else, or if it's a less lethal beanbag round and that person, you know, moves down suddenly and you hit them in the wrong area, even if ultimately it's a, quote, justified event, that gives officers pause. They want a degree of certainty that what they do will result the way they wanted it to.
Thank you. What's a chemical restraint?
As it relates to ALS with fire rescue?
It's in Circle 24 under medical treatment. Certain
I believe you're talking
individuals
about
show obvious signs that chemical restraint may be necessary.
Yeah, so going back a few years, excited delirium, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term of art.
I am.
Excited delirium several years ago was something that we were faced with across this country. And based on a number of studies and recommendations that was done, when we did the first revision of our use of force policy, I believe in 2014, we looked at best practices, and fire rescue, through their advanced life support system ambulances, ALS, they actually carry, I'm not a medic, but I believe it's ketamine and Halidol are the two the two chemicals that they're medications that they have. And if we believe somebody is suffering from an excited delirium type of an event, then what we do is, by policy, we stage that ALS ambulance close by, and then once we have the situation under control, if we believe that we can get them in there safely, then we have fire rescue come in, do a checkup on the person, and that may end up including the use of one of those two medications, but that's not for us to decide. We don't decide whether or not it's used.
Thanks. We've read that FBI and ICE use driver's license photos for photo recognition searches. Under which circumstances would we ever share body-worn camera footage with state or federal agencies?
You know, I think we have, I'm not sure if we've had any requests right now. When we went into Article 72 and talked about the need for the dissemination of body-worn camera footage, it was really mainly discussions about we were going to distribute it publicly or we were going to use it for training. The one case that I can remember where we were asked about it, I believe we asked for a subpoena or some other type of legal request that we could look at and say, yes, we will honor that, or no, we will not.
Okay, I'll move on. I'll send you some more questions. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Councilman Albornoz.
Thank you, Madam President. This past Friday, I was at some garden apartments off University Boulevard for a Street Outreach Network event, which is a partnership with MCPD as well as Montgomery College and MCPS, and it was hot. But it was packed. There were tons of members of the community there, and at one point, the balloon artists who had been hired to make balloons left because it was so hot. Two MCPD officers went on their phones, clicked a YouTube video, learned how to make balloons, and then made balloons for the kids that had been waiting in line for quite some time. Those events are important, and I know events in general only scratch the surface sometimes, but what I observed during that particular event was a lot of dialogue and interaction between members of the community, but in particular youth, with officers that were there. We discussed in our Public Safety Committee hearing on community policing the need for more training to make sure that officers do have more positive interactions and are in a better position to be able to communicate more effectively. And I saw very clear examples of that on Friday, and many through the last 10 years of my career within the county. Chief, you talked in that session about the need for more training in this space. Could you elaborate on that a little bit, and what, if any, efforts are underway or will be underway within the plan you described at the beginning of your testimony to specifically address how law enforcement officials can more respectfully and vice versa interact with our youth in particular?
Absolutely, and I think that's a great question. I think that, you know, communication is clearly a key, right? When we talk about, when we have some communities who have this barrier and are afraid of the police, and we have to figure out a way to kind of break that, to break that down. And one of the things I think we've been really focusing on, and we have to get better at it, particularly with our younger officers. And I remember being young and sort of being shy in many ways of engaging with people. But just being a police officer is not good enough to be able to really kind of have dialogue with people and young people to kind of really understand, you know, and you know, when you're having a two-way discussion, it makes it better. So we are looking at, again, within the community engagement division and the training division, to try to figure out, that's a part of that work group of how we can go about looking at trying to have our folks engage more, to develop different strategies in order to be able to interact with our communities, utilizing different methods, okay, where, you know, when we look at sort of where people are, like when we talk about how people communicate, right? We know a large community, part of our segment of our community do it via social media, as an example. How can we get better at communicating via social media to communicate well with the public, with the youth? How can we, you know, engage in these different activities that are occurring across the county that we, you know, a lot of times we might show up at, but the question I have sometimes are we really engaged even though we're there? And so, you know, whether it's, you know, our officers walking around giving glow sticks to little kids and just having a really good discussion about them, and you know, getting feedback from them about policing in general, and, you know, it's sort of, we become, you know, lots of times you become the show, you might say, because kids want to know all the tools that you have on your belt. We do career days, for example, all throughout this county at our public schools. And is one of the favorite things that I always like to do, walking into a classroom and having these discussions with our kids about what we do and how we do it. No matter what age they are, whether they're in the first grade, the fifth grade, or, you know, even in middle to high school, when we talk about career advancements. So it's important, I agree with you, that we continue to enhance on that, and we'll continue to try to prove and really show to you all, to demonstrate some of the strategies that we've come up with when we look at some of the trainings that are out there to look in community engagement.
I appreciate that. I also very much agree with my colleague, Councilmember Jawando, in terms of identifying positive metrics to track the overall efforts of officers and those good deeds that are by the thousands that are out there. I know there are events where we specifically highlight and embrace and acknowledge really great work that was done within the community. I've used this example before, but Assistant Chief LaCorey, when he was a patrol officer 14 years ago, and my wife ran a food pantry in the Langley Park area, used to bring food from the Costco on his own and help stock the shelves and help organize the shelves then, which meant a lot to the community and certainly a lot to my wife. And so there are many examples of that within the force that need to be highlighted. Specifically around metrics, I do think, as we discussed again in our committee session, things like how many referrals an officer is making to a sister county agency for a youth that they may come across that may be in some situation that is a challenge or negative. Tracking those kinds of statistics, I think, would be helpful. And so as you develop the strategies you mentioned earlier, if you can come back to us at a later date with some of those specific metrics and maybe other best practices that have been observed from other law enforcement so that we highlight the positive along with the punitive, I think would be really important. I just want to bring up two communities that to elaborate on specifically, and that is, of course, our immigrant community. Appreciate law enforcement's efforts to support the county executive's executive order, but there are a number of tools that I know law enforcement uses to engender trust, particularly within our immigrant communities. And if you could talk a little bit about how we're helping victims of crime through the U visa and T visa process, and how that is a resource, and whether or not we've been able to effectively employ that to provide more support, particularly for our undocumented community who are often the victims of crime and don't report it.
Yeah, so we have an active U visa program, I know for sure, T visa, via our Special Victims Investigations Division. And what happens is when our victims of crimes actually need to fill out this documentation and needs to be reviewed by us and signed off, we actively do this. Within the Special Victims, we have a lieutenant that's specifically assigned to review those cases and coordinate with, generally, there's counsel of those particular victims when they're trying to, I guess, get their U visas and T visas approved. So from that aspect. So we're very actively involved in approving those processes, or at least going through those processes and getting back with those counsel of the victims that are being impacted in our community by crime, but who are undocumented.
Fantastic. I appreciate that. And then finally, for now, you know, the fastest growing demographic in our population is our senior population. As the council president said, community policing is not a one-size-fits-all. I know there have been efforts to make sure we are more proactively reaching out to our senior community. I don't want to elaborate on that now because time is short, but just to please continue practicing those efforts. And the efforts done around special needs children, particularly with autism, is a great example of where we, I think, have been able to effectively employ community policing and can be a model that we employ for other communities to engender trust. So thank you for the responses to those questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Well, amen to that. Shout out to Jake, who does a great job working with your organization, a good personal friend. So, Jake, you got a shout out. I want to jump right into this because I've heard some questions about where we practice community policing right now and where we do a great job of it. One of the things, and where it's explicitly stated, and where we make sure that we train on those practices. And I just want to read very quickly, a school resource officer, this is from your own website, a school resource officer is a sworn uniformed law officer trained in emergency preparedness, crisis management, community policing concepts, and problem solving, who is assigned to work as a liaison to MCPS. Let me tell you that one of the other great models that we have for community policing is our school resource officers. I'm a huge fan of this program. You know how much I believe in it and how it needs to be expanded, and it really does build on that model. And I do hope that the same ways in which we are training our school resource officers is the same way in which we're going to enact those same community policing models when it comes to our generic officers. Because I can tell you, I was with Officer Junius at Montgomery Blair High School, my alma mater, and I can't tell you the interactions between her and the students are building the kind of trust and the relationships that we need to have. And when it came to incidents, I saw firsthand to where students were coming to her and saying, listen, Officer Junius, this is what is going down. This is what is about to happen. You need to be involved and engaged. And Councilmember Hucker stepped away. He was there that day. Councilmember Reamer was there that day, earlier for an interview on that same day that I was there with that. And there was a fight at McDonald's that same very day that we were there. And they knew about what was happening, and they got tipped off before the call actually came in on the radio. They got tipped off from students who told the school resource officer what was going on and that they needed to go over there because this thing was about to happen. That is a model of what effective community policing is about and how it can work to our advantage. I'll tell you something else, you know, and it's we sit here on this dais and we can't help but see what's in the audience and see the signs that are there. Let me just say, coffee with a cop. I was in Damascus a few years ago with then Sergeant Jim Brown. And there was coffee with a cop that was there, and so folks from the community were coming in and talking. A woman came in with her 2 children. And she said, the reason why I'm here and had never been to any of these things before is because I want to make sure that my kids are not afraid of the police. My young son is afraid of the police. And so it was, then Sergeant Brown went over and said, and got down on one knee. And Sergeant Brown, he's a big guy, right? He got down on one knee and started talking to the young boy and was talking to him about how the police are there to protect and serve, and how, and the little boy shied away and was tightly holding on to his mother's leg. And then eventually at some point warmed up and said, hey, look, everything, and talked to this young child and made sure that this young child understood that the police were there for them to protect them. Oh, and by the way, that mother and those children were white. I know that we pretty much assumed from that story that they would be black, but this is something where, again, community policing is not just for people of color in our communities of color. Community policing is something that's for everyone in our community. And there is that level of trust and that need for us to outreach to the community and make sure that all of them feel safe and that they have a relationship that's there. So I will tell you that regardless of what signs people want to hold up, the reality is that I saw firsthand to where a new relationship was formed between that young child and the police officers from Coffee with a Cop. I've seen to where folks have come to Coffee with a Cop with Officer Marcus Dixon, one of our community police officers at Montgomery College, and talked about particular issues that are happening in their community. And we've then gone out and figured out what's going on and made arrests and made things happen that have made those communities safer as a result of those conversations. These are the kinds of things that are happening that we need to build on. I will agree with my colleague, Councilmember Duwando. I am not a fan of us sitting officers in places and just doing stings on traffic stops and things like that when they can be out there doing more effective things. And it's not to say that, again, people aren't concerned about speeding and their fatal crashes and all those kinds of things. I don't want to diminish that at all. I think that there's a balance, right? I don't know if we've necessarily found what that balance is. And I will say that what I do think that we need to be conscious of is when we set up a sting to do whatever it is, whether it's traffic violations or whatever, that's right outside of a neighborhood, that's already being sieged by a lot of the crime and drugs and all those kinds of things. It seems like a double whammy for those residents because they're asking for police to be there and save them from some of the bad actors that are in their community. And then on top of that, here they are getting a speeding ticket or getting something else, and they feel as though they're being harassed. So from that perspective, as we look at how we can grow, I would say that those are the things that we can do a better job of and be very cognizant of where we're doing those kinds of initiatives to make sure that we're not, challenging those communities that are already challenged. That's incredibly important. So my question, Madam President, can you tell me about Damascus Gardens? Because Damascus Gardens is one in which I think from a community policing model, I'd like to understand what you saw as some positives as well as some things that you'd like to, that maybe you could have changed to really make a difference when it comes to that community policing model.
Absolutely, thank you. So Damascus Gardens was our last open-air drug market in the county. And for 20 years, undoubtedly, our police department had attempted to arrest ourselves out of this drug problem in that particular neighborhood. We thought that by making arrests that we would be impacting the community, and that would be the end of it. That was not the end of it. The community continued to be, quote, under siege. And so we needed to come up with a new strategy, a new model to figure this out. So one of the things we worked on, and I don't know if President Navarro remembered that she actually presented us with this suggestion, but it actually came from what we call the Drug Market Initiative that was done out of Michigan State University, but it was a DOJ project. And when we became a part of that, I was the lead on it, where we looked at how could we impact this community in a way that we could, quote, number one, eliminate the open air drug market, but what were the underlying issues in this community that were creating this problem? And this is what we found, and the long story short was we identified the actual drug dealers who were actually creating the problem. But there were people that were involved in the drug business, right? But they were middlemen or low-hanging fruit, you might say. But they were doing criminal acts in the response to that. So the individuals that were responsible, we called them the A-listers. They were going to be arrested because they had criminal records, and we dealt with them. But the B-listers, who were the low-hanging fruit, the middlemen, we were going to really kind of give them a second chance. And so what we did, after we did our undercover operation and we identified all of the criminal acts, we brought the B-listers, we arrested the A-listers, but the B-listers, we brought them in, and we brought them into a community meeting so that all of the community of Damascus Gardens and beyond could actually be a part of this. And we said to them, okay, we had envelopes with their statement of charges in the document, but it was not signed by the detective. Who actually is Captain Kokinas, who was at the time in Special Investigations under my command. And basically what we did was we stated to them that if you did not get arrested again in the next year, committed a crime of violence, committed any drug violation, we would rip up the statement of charges and you would not be charged. And what we said to them is, this was a partnered event, Health and Human Services, the faith community, the state's attorney's office were all partners in this. And even the Damascus Gardens, the complex was a partner. And what we said to them was, in fact, listen, you do this, but we need to know what are your issues, what are the problems that you have that have caused you to be involved in this drug trade. Many of them came to us and said, one young man came to us and said, well, the reason I'm doing it is because I go to the Weiss's Market up the street, and when I fill out my job application, I can't get hired because they see Bethesda Church Road on my address, and it stigmatized me. And so he said the next best thing was for me to go to Germantown or Gaithersburg, for example, to work at some business in that area. But guess what? County cut services for ride-on. So therefore, I don't have transportation to get to Gaithersburg or Germantown. So therefore, what am I left with? This is the option that I had in order to put some money in my pocket. Or you might have somebody who was addicted to cocaine, as an example, who really, that was just to supply their habit. And so we provided them with with substance abuse, services that could help them with their habit. So out of those 9 individuals that we identified that were the B-listers, only 2 of them failed. So we only ended up arresting 2 of those, and they're really. One that I remember specifically was the fact that she still was addicted and she couldn't beat her addiction. And by going to court, it forced her to go to a drug court to get better. So that was a win. And when we talk about the impact of the community, one of the greatest things out of that project was the fact that we had people who lived in that community who came to me, and we did after action events at the community. And one of the ladies came to me, she says, I come here, she says, I used to live in Prince George's County. She says, and I've lived here for about a year now. And she says, when I would go every Sunday, I go visit my family. And when I would come back, on my stoop of my apartment would be all of the drug dealers, and they wouldn't even move out of the way for me to go into my apartment. But she says, ever since you all did what you did, and that's had the greatest impact, now my community, they're no longer there, and I feel much safer in my community. That's the impact of community policing from that aspect of Damascus Gardens. Okay.
Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. It's really nice to see the leadership of the department here. And I was very grateful to have the chance to sit down with you recently to review the recent incidents and to ask questions and get your comments on that. And I appreciate the council president scheduling this discussion today. It's been very informative. I want to thank you for embracing the proposal for a policing policy advisory board. Your participation in our recent press conference, where you talked about the value that it could bring, was very helpful. I think it is an example of community policing. I think that we have a challenge right now. There are, thanks to social media, what might have been something that was only known to a few is now seen by many, and that is the environment that we are in. And the fact that recruitment is down in the profession is not a Montgomery County thing. I mean, the fact that recruitment is down is not the result of recent controversies and incidents. It's something that is an underlying challenge the profession itself is, grappling with a different context than has ever been the case before. And I think the question for everyone is how to reinvent, rethink, and improve the work of the department and every department and the profession itself, so that the community is closer, so that when there are incidents, there's more confidence that they are understood and addressed, and that the community has a voice. So I wanted to just generally ask about your views on community standards as part of community policing. I think that every community is different, and how every community would have a different perspective on policy issues. What works for one area might not work for another area. But we've been talking about a lot of different policy issues today, whether it is what is the definition of community policing, or how do we train officers in situations where there's a mental health issue. The list goes on. These are all policy issues that I think is just hard for the council, and not necessary for the council to constantly be immersed in, but the community has to be nevertheless at a table with the department to have that conversation. And that is the underlying goal of this commission proposal, is to say every one of these issues deserves a forum where there's engagement, and the leadership, the union, the community, all has to be at the table together and have a discussion. In my experience here at the council, I've been on the council now for 9 years. I don't recall a lot of times when we have weighed in specifically on policy issues that govern the day-to-day work of police officers. It's just not something that we have typically done. That's been something that's handled, I think, often between the department and the county executive. And I think that today, I think we ought to change that. I think that the community should be with you at the table. And what I really appreciated about your response to this proposal was that you wanted it to be a collaboration between the department and the community, and not simply a platform for people to attack one another, but a way to have dialogue and to learn from one another and to hopefully reach better conclusions. So I guess I'd just like to ask if you wanted to talk a little bit about that issue, the potential, how you perceive the department today getting feedback from the community on policy issues and best practices, and how you think we might be able to improve that.
Sure. So thank you, Councilman Reamer. I mean, I think at this point, it's not hidden amongst anyone is that reality is that our police officers, who we serve, is this community. And there's no way to say it better than we have to be transparent. We have to be accountable to this community. And so when we open up our policy manual to show people what we do and how we do it every day, what are the guidelines that officers have to abide by. That is something that the officers have to acknowledge that they read the policy, they understand the policy, for us to be able to better serve this community. And so when we look at transparency from that aspect, and communities may have some issue with the policy, that, as it relates to maybe dealing with kids in schools, as an example, dealing with our students. If they see something that they think needs to be improved upon and they believe that there's a best practice out there somewhere else that better serves this particular community, then I don't see any objection whatsoever. I mean, what people have to understand about Montgomery County, and I think I'm just making a statement for our public to understand, policing in one district may be a little bit different than policing in another. When you have a very urban type of an environment compared to a rural environment, those are two different types of police officers that are, when I say different, of what they do every single day, what the focus might be. So if, for example, if we talk about Up County, where roadways traffic is not as heavy, and, potential for our roadways to be a little bit more dangerous, right? There's no pedestrians, but there's just cars, right? That might be causing some problems in the public safety world, versus in an urban area where we have lots of pedestrians. Again, what's our focus, right? What's the direction given? How do we police that way? How do we interact with our community in a rural setting versus how do we connect with them in a very urban setting? I think that's different, and we have to be open-minded to understand there's not one specific model that fits all, that we have to be very unique in our own ways of how we do these things and how it's directed. And our command staffs are to understand the problems that they have within their communities, and then what we see as problems that needs to be solved to make our communities much safer. And so I don't disagree with you at all. And when we look at that, to sit down and have discussions with our public, we've been very open-minded. We have Chief Manger, and this has gone back for quite some time, even before Chief Manger, where we have the African American Advisory Committee where we talk about policies, the Latino Advisory Committees where we talk about these types of policies. It's just the fact that they don't have any sort of power to impact it from a standpoint of legislation. But the reality is they do have influence on executive staff and the chief about what they think is most important to them. And it gives us pause to make us have to look back and review that. So that's been done before. It's just that now you're putting it in a more formalized manner that we have no objection to. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you. I just think there's so many issues to talk about. I'll wrap up because the hour's getting late. But my takeaway from the White Oak incident really was the use of marijuana in our enforcement. Yeah, that to me was what really stuck out. And it was the same experience I had on my ride-alongs. There's a lot of interaction that is driven by marijuana as the entry point to some kind of enforcement. And I know that marijuana has been decriminalized, and that in the White Oak incident, for example, they were arrested and then unarrested for that. But it still leads me to ask why. Why are we interacting with residents over that issue at all? To me, that sounds like a policy issue. Maybe it's a legal issue. Maybe it requires further legislation to address. I'm not sure. But these are the kinds of big, weighty topics that I think have to be talked about publicly, have to be thought through, and then ultimately recommendations received and consideration made about policy changes and best practices. So again, I just want to thank you for embracing the role of the community. It's been a longstanding practice, but you're also embracing a new approach, and I think it is meaningful that you've done that, and I want to thank you for that, and we'll keep working together.
Yes, and if I could, just real briefly, and I don't disagree with you as it relates to totally with your marijuana issue, but the one thing I do want to make sure that is perfectly clear, over the past 5 years, all of our drug-related homicides that have occurred here in Montgomery County, and they've been way too many, all of them have been marijuana, have been based upon the marijuana, no other drug. So I just wanted to make that clear.
I hear you. That's the other side of the coin. But I think, for example, in this case, I don't think there was any real question that any of these guys were A-listers. That's not really what was going on in this case. So
Well, I don't disagree
yeah.
there either, but I would state that, for example, we made a stop just last week of a car, and there was marijuana coming from the car. When we went in and did a search of the vehicle, we found 2 handguns, and out of those individuals that were arrested, one of them was a prohibited felon. So again, the start of it started, yes, with the smell of marijuana, but that's a reality in our society. So that's for a larger discussion.
It's a larger discussion, absolutely, but that's one we got to have. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Chief Jones, for your leadership during the last few months, taking the mantle during this transition time, and also for providing officers to the series of events that I hosted for Pride Month, despite the onslaught of hate that I received from individuals. I also appreciate your candor in condemning the kneeing incident that we're talking about at length today. And I have to state for the record, sharing the sentiment of many of my colleagues, that it made me sick to see what one of our own did to someone in the community. And given that criticism from the dais, from the community, from leadership within the police department itself, I have to believe that there is somewhat a demoralized force with all that criticism, coupled with a very mistrusting community as well. So what do we need to do better, which is something that you alluded to at the beginning in your opening statement, that we need to do better. And let me rephrase the question in a more succinct way, given the conversations that we here in the county are having about the future of our police force and who will lead it. What is your advice to the next police chief on how we can do better here in Montgomery County?
So I think at the end of the day, what you say is right on point. I would say this, though. Though when we say a demoralized police department as a result of, for example, that particular incident, I will tell you that there were officers who clearly understood that that was wrong, and who basically did not disagree with the decision that was made in retrospect. So as much as that's never at the forefront of any discussion, I just want to make sure it's known that, you know, we have officers who have high morals, who understand what is right, and they know when sometimes things have gone a little bit out of whack, it's too far. When somebody's done so, who utilizes the N-word, that's not acceptable. I had officers who were actually mad, who were upset about that. And so I want to just make sure that that's clear. My recommendation to the next police chief is that they have to stay on the road of really training and driving the point home about professionalism for this police department. And when we talk about professionalism, the decorum, the speech, the engagement of really taking it to the highest level. And training becomes a large part of that. You know, we hire good people. And we have to continue on that. Just because we are sort of in this state of making it's more difficult for us to hire police officers maybe in this environment. You know, there's lots going on, and that we again have a different discussion on recruitment and retention of officers who come on this department. But the reality is that when we do hire, we are not going to lower our standards for the people that are going to be a part of Montgomery County Police. And whoever the next chief is should not do that. They need to maintain the high integrity that we have created for this department. We come from the human race. Good people do bad things. We've seen that. That happens. It has to be addressed. It is the responsibility of all of our executives, our supervisors, to hold our people accountable when they do the things that are against our policy and procedures and what we expect them to do every day. And so that, again, would be my high recommendation to the next chief, is to really to make sure that we're maintaining the integrity in order to build upon, to get to trust in our community. Thank you.
I agree with you that integrity and trust are integral to keeping our community safe, to fostering that relationship, the back and forth that is central to the community policing that we all want and strive for. Again, thank you for your years of service and for taking this mantle at this difficult time.
Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Council President and colleagues. Thank you, Chief Jones and your team. I think this is a really important and robust discussion. A lot of my questions have been asked, and I will try to be brief, but just had a couple comments. One, you just talked about a road, and to me, that's one of my takeaways from this conversation, that community policing isn't a destination, it's a journey. And obviously, the department has taken significant strides, not just over the last few years, but over decades, to continuously reinvent itself, and that journey needs to continue. And I think we need to double down on those efforts. And so I appreciate that, but I think sometimes when we talk about this idea, and we started this conversation, the Council President convened this conversation about, honing in on what community policing is. And I think what my takeaway is there are specific aspects of community policing, but really it is a continuous effort to involve the community and not view it as a competing idea that police officers interacting with the community where they're serving and protecting, are not two separate ideas, but one helps the other. You can't serve a community unless the people in the community trust you enough to tell you what's going on. When you show up on a scene, you need the community member to tell you where the offender is and to tell you what happens, and to speak honestly and feel comfortable enough and trust you enough that they're not going to get in trouble or they're not going to put themselves into harm's way by trying to help you do your job. And so clearly, to me, that is a big part of it. And I think, obviously I share the concerns. I can't put myself in the shoes of some of my colleagues who've spoken very eloquently about their personal experiences, and I wouldn't attempt to. But I think it's really important that as I share the deep concerns, as have been discussed, of some of the recent incidents that have occurred and how devastating and damaging they are for our community, for our police department, for all of us who share certain values that were not reflected, I think it's really important also that we not use a broad brush and paint all officers by the actions of one or two officers, just like we don't want officers to treat community members with the same broad brush as the actions of one or two speaking for a whole group of people, a whole race of people, a whole neighborhood of people. Just because one person in a neighborhood commits bad actions doesn't mean that everybody in that neighborhood is a bad actor. And, I think we need to really focus on that, and the same fear that many community members have that I don't have to deal with, and I'm fortunate and privileged in that sense. That's real, and we have to treat it as real. And it's also real that families of police officers who leave the house every day have to fear for what's going to happen to their loved one. And that is not a totally different idea. That is a very similar idea of the palpable concern and fear that a family member has for their child, for their sibling, for their spouse, for their friend, for their loved one. And we've got to try to get out of that cycle. And so I appreciate this conversation. I think it's not the beginning, but the part of a larger conversation that I look forward to having. And I just have to say, I really do appreciate some of the community policing that I see. The chair of the Public Safety Committee, Councilmember Katz, and I did what we would call Shop with a Cop, but I think it's now called Heroes and Helpers at Target. But bringing in Title I students from challenging schools and giving them some money to shop with a police officer and to pick out toys. And I can't tell you how exciting that was for me to watch that interaction, to see how much those young people enjoyed their time, and frankly, to see how much the police officers enjoyed their time. And For me, the same is true with the police officers who are in front of places of worship, as much as I wish that they didn't have to be there, but that's, that interaction with those individuals and all the other interactions that we have. I mean, the school resource officers and the interactions that they have, I mean, I think these are all parts of it. And I can speak to Commander LaCour, who already got called out by Councilmember Albernaz with his efforts with the food pantry, but I will add to that. We had a community conversation, a town hall meeting in Kensington, and then Commander LaCour showed up and was just there to listen and to hear from the community and to demonstrate his interest in the community. And there was an issue that came up related to a pedestrian safety issue that was a real serious issue for somebody. And the question was asked, he came up, he went to the corner. As I took another question, he made a phone call. About 10 minutes later, he came up to me and said, I have an announcement if that's okay. And I said, sure. And he announced that it had been fixed. And, to me, that also demonstrates it. So I think all of these are different data points. They're all important parts of it. I don't think there's a one aspect of this that needs to be addressed. I think it's in all aspects of the police department, and I think that's been made clear, and I just appreciate the commitment of the police department. I appreciate particularly the commitment of colleagues on the council who have really honed in on this. I am continuing to learn more and look forward to continuing this conversation and continuing this journey with you, because if we're going to have the type of community that we expect to be, that we want to be, that we believe we are, then we need to have a police department that reflects that, and we need to have a community that reflects that, and continue to work together with the community and our police department together in order to accomplish it.
Thank you. We started this conversation. I mentioned that, our county definitely is a microcosm of our country, and I would say the world. And I very much appreciate you taking the time to come over to engage with us. I've often said that our two top, I think, areas that we constantly feel so proud of and we understand are pivotal to Montgomery County quality of life is our quality of our school system and also our public safety. And our police department and our fire and rescue and everybody that works so hard to ensure that we have very low crime rates and that we're always very proud of the fact that we can call this a safe place. And that is in, of course, large part because of everything that you do on a daily basis to continue to provide that excellent protection to all our residents. So that is important to highlight. I think it's been evident by this conversation that we are not shy about engaging and talking about it and mentioning it. And many other jurisdictions that have had chronic issues that we have discussed today and these, incidents that have occurred, they don't have these kinds of conversations. At least I know that when I've done my research, I don't see a lot of that occurring. So to that extent, I feel really good about the fact that we are able to step up and to examine it and to call it what it is and to act to see how we can improve. That is very critical. And so for that, I am very, very grateful that you're here today. Somebody mentioned the work of the Street Outreach Network, for example. And I've had so many conversations with that team about what is never reported because it's about prevention. There are so many incidents that are avoided because of the collaboration between the school system, the police department, HHS, the community, that we will never find in any report. But that is part of what we do here on a daily basis. And so that does not get reported, it does not get examined necessarily, but is so critical. And when I hear the leadership of that team talk about how critical it is that whoever the leadership of this department has to be somebody that knows our community well, that is really important because we are a complex county. This is not a homogeneous county, very complex county. So I have to tell you that, as I said earlier, our public safety, our police department, our schools, et cetera, those are really critical. And as a leader in this county, I am really looking at that very carefully because there is a fragile balance. There is a fragile balance. And there are people in our communities who don't come out and talk at panels or at, community forums about policing. They don't come out, and you know why? Because they don't feel comfortable doing that. But they talk to me, and I know that they have also established relationships with many of those police officers who have come to the community, and I've seen it as well. So we have a lot in front of us, I think, not just about these incidents and how we move forward, but also how we address this issue of leadership of this police department going into our future. There's a lot to take into consideration. And I'll say, Chief Jones, I really do want to express my appreciation for how you have served our county for so many years. It is not an easy task, but many of you have been there doing this, and you've done it in such a wonderful way. But there's no doubt that just, this council obviously is not going to shy away from calling it when we need to call it and addressing it when we need to address it, because it is our responsibility. So thank you so much. I also want to thank the Chair of Public Safety. I know when we spoke about, let's go ahead and schedule this, he felt that it was so important and everybody found the time to do it. So thank you so much. And Ms. Susan Farag, who's been very busy lately, thank you again also for being so collaborative, and for the community that is here also, thank you for being here. And I also see our state's attorney, John McCarthy. Everyone is here because this is paramount to us in the county. Thank you so much. And we are going to go right into the interview, because I figure it's probably better to do that than to take a break, so nobody will come back. Just kidding. So let's go right on to our next item, which is item number 6. And this is this is the interview of the county executive's appointee for the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, Ms. Angela Talley. Mm-hmm. Okay. Good afternoon. Yeah, it is afternoon already. It sure is. All right. Well, Ms. Talley, welcome. We are going to engage in a conversation. I don't know if Mr. do you want to make any introductory comments?
Good afternoon, Madam President and members of the council. Caroline Sturgis, Assistant Chief Administrative Officer. This afternoon, I am pleased to introduce Angela Talley for confirmation as Director for the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Since Rob Green's departure a couple of months ago, Angela has been serving as the Acting Director for the department. Her almost 30-year career with the county, including about 20 at DOCR, has afforded her a smooth transition into the role. Angela is an experienced executive who has demonstrated 10 years of management oversight of adult correctional facilities, pretrial services, and juvenile justice programs. Over the past 2 months, Angela has proven in short order that she is more than capable of leading the department, which is why it was an easy decision for the county executive to appoint Angela as the permanent director. We are fortunate for the years of service Angela has committed to the county, and we are looking forward to seeing her build upon the innovative work happening at the department. The county executive's appointment is a historic event for the county. Upon confirmation, Angela Talley would be the first woman director for the department in the county's history. So I am excited to introduce her. Thank you.
Thank you. We're very excited to have this opportunity as well. So, Ms. Talley, I just have 4 very short questions, and then we'll engage in a conversation with my colleagues and anything else you'd like to add. Before you assumed the position of acting director, you were the community corrections chief. Please describe some of the challenges you faced in that role and how that has prepared you for this new position.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to first thank the County Executive Eldridge for appointing me to this position, CAO Klein and Assistant CA Sturgis for introducing me. And I appreciate your time this afternoon. I understand it's a busy day. I want to give you some history about community corrections. We were doing lean, and we're all invested in this lean project, but we did lean in 2016. I was the chief of pretrial services, which was located on Ardennes Avenue in Rockville. Pretrial programs average about 1,500 defendants under their supervision. In 2016, under direction of former Director Robert Green and myself, we decided to move pretrial services into our pre-release residential adult correctional facility in the community. And so we created a community corrections program in order to be able to create efficiencies within our work, because a lot of the community pretrial and pre-release services will overlap. Of course, it was a cost savings to the county. We got out of lease space. We were able to save about 10 county positions by doing this, and it was a win-win for us. At any given time, 71% of our DOCR population, which today is 2,117, 71% of them were supervised under community corrections programs under my leadership. 1,500 about were for pretrial services, and another 100 or so for the residential pre-release program, which is a program that transitions individuals from the Clarksburg facility, our Rockville facility, our state facilities, and our federal facilities were for individuals who are sentenced and transitioning back into the community. And so challenges in the community, when you are running a public safety facility where you have access to the community every day, and we're talking about a population with special needs, high intensive needs of substance abuse, mental health. We're talking about access to victims. And so the challenges is to be in that neighborhood and still be a good neighbor and provide services to the population that you're serving. And considering public safety first, always. Considering the service that the population needs, operating facilities that meet American Correctional Association standards, what we recently passed, and I'm very proud at all 3 facilities in June, passing our Maryland Commission standards for operations of an adult correctional facility. And the work is 24/7. The responses is 24/7. You have a high increased risk of community incidents when you're overseeing a program with a magnitude of 71% of your population being housed in that facility or coming to that facility for services. And you have to be able to use the technology. We've been very successful in our use of electronic monitoring to help us as a tool as we offer up these opportunities for people to come through community corrections, because we believe it's a vital step as you transition back into community to be able to secure employment, housing, reconnect back with family, and take a part of services that are in the community. And so during that time, since 2016 when I came over to that role, I worked hand in hand with the former Director Green. At one point, it was just he and I left, and I became his right-hand person, serving in the acting role in the capacity many times. When they asked me to take on this role in May, I jumped at the opportunity to offer stabilization to our department of over 500 men and women who I'm very proud to work with. I started on the floor myself as in many different roles, and custody and security is one of them, and worked my way up. And so I appreciate the work that they do. I appreciate the challenges that we face every single day, because no day is similar. Every day is different, and especially when you're operating in the community. And as I tell people, the same people who are housed in our secure facilities in Clarksburg and Rockville are the same individuals who are transferring down to our community corrections programs. And so you're facing the same behaviors, but on a community. You have to trust and be able to provide services that people are going to go from point A to point B and come back, that people won't abscond, that people won't reoffend while you're supervising them in the community. So those are some of the challenges I've dealt with for the last 3 years or more, even in different roles of pretrial chief, and as a manager at pre-release services before I was a health and human services manager.
The Council and the County Executive are committed to implementing racial equity and social justice initiatives within government. What are some opportunities where DOCR can help achieve equitable outcomes for criminal justice system involved individuals?
Okay, thank you. Well, racial equity begins with the acknowledgement that an education is needed. What do you know? What are you doing now? An acknowledgement that we are not there. We need to be able to train our staff, to provide the training so that people are aware of their unconscious biases, get people out of the status quo of doing business, believing that we meet the needs when we may not truly be meeting the needs. We have to be able to talk to our customers, talk to our returning citizens. We are in the midst of, excuse me, we're in the midst of developing customer surveys for at different various checkpoints through the DOCR, where we will check in with individuals to see if the services are meeting the needs, whether that's medical services, whether that's programming, housing needs, and we hope that we create spaces where people are trusting enough to be able to share that information honestly with us, directly with us, in order for us to plan effectively to meet their needs. We need to rely on our experts and our mentors and our volunteers who are joining us in our case collaboration of people, of returning citizens back in the community, to hear what they need to say about our policies. We believe that they are equitable, but are they? And not being afraid to hear those answers that says, well, maybe you need to do things another way in order to be able to meet the needs of all, so we can have better outcomes for everyone.
Thank you. What are some of your ideas for addressing current challenges in delivering programming targeted towards mental health, substance abuse, education, and workforce training?
And we do a great job, but we can always get better. There was a time when we felt like our correctional facilities were turning into the new state hospitals. That's where we were. But we're fortunate enough to be in a county where we have implemented mental health court at the circuit and district court levels, and we're very happy that they have gotten off the ground and very robust in their operation. The Justice Reinvestment Act in October of 2017, it shortened the time that we have with individuals now. Now there's an opportunity for a person to earn 5 days off of their good conduct time sentences, another 5 days to be invested in programming. And so we have to look at our targeted interventions and ensuring that they still meet the needs for people that we have on a short-term basis, because that's one of the changes. That's the reality. How do we transition them quicker out of our secure facilities, with stabilization, stabilize on meds, stabilize with substance abuse, and offer those advantages when they get into community corrections or re-enter back into society. Right now we have the Jail Addiction Services Program at the jail, but we need to be able to institute, I would like to see us to put more substance abuse education in our community programs, to maybe even to look at whether we have any substance abuse treatment in those programs. We know that medically, we're on the road to medically assisted treatment within the facilities now. We have now become very engaged with population and stabilization of individuals before they leave. We are passing out Narcan kits to save lives. And so that's the reality of where corrections is today. And we have a vital part in meeting the needs of the substance abuse and mental health people with those issues. When we talk about jobs, that's near and dear to my heart. One of my previous jobs was a work release coordinator, and I understand the challenges that returning citizens face when we talk about barriers, and I heard some of those earlier during the other testimony. And I would like to get away from, we transfer people to our community corrections and we say you must be able to work. But we have to get out of that thinking, because that may not be what it is for everyone. We may have to start transferring people in order for them to get stable, to be invested in rehabilitation programs, vocational training, or simply be going to school. And you're at our program and being able to do that. We were not greatly open to that before, but we have to be able to be in the business of really having outcomes that's going to make a difference in someone's lives. One of the best programs that I was able to operate for the short period that it was in operation before budgetary restraints switched it over to Collaboration Council was the Conservation Corps. And I loved that program. Transitional age youth, 18 to 24, don't really have a clue about where we need to be, how to get there, and how to make those choices. And being able to provide life skills, education, and earning a wage while you're learning skills was a great program. Now, did everyone change their behavior because we had this magical program? No, but it was there, and you had coaches on site, you had staff on site to coach people through the difficult times, through the challenges times. How do you work with supervision? How do you accept taking feedback and not thinking it's a personal attack? And so those are the things that they were coached, and I would love to be able to see a program of very similar be instituted at our community corrections program, where your day is full. I'm not real happy about idle time. I like to see busyness in a day. I think it keeps everyone focused. And so those are some of the ideas that I have about reentry and where we need to go in the future.
Excellent. Are there any potential conflicts of interest of which we should be aware?
I don't call it a conflict of interest, but I have many family members that work for the county for many years, and so we have all found this the place to be.
All right, let me start with Council Vice President Katz.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I know that you want us to do this quickly, and I will. But candidly, Angela, I could speak for hours about how wonderful you truly are. And I've seen you at Pre-Release and Reentry Services Community Advisory Board. I think that's the official name of it, several times a year. You do a marvelous job. I have heard you work with and discuss with the people who are in pre-release, where you listened and you learned and you explained and why we do what we do and how the reasons that we do it to keep people safe and to be fair while we're doing it. I've seen you concerned about helping people help themselves. I've attended the GED graduations with you at the corrections facility in Clarksburg, and where we begin to see people's lives change there. I could literally go on and on, but let me just say very candidly, I look forward, if my colleagues will allow me to jump in to be the first one, I look forward to making the motion so that you will become the director. And you're following two great directors, both Director Rob Green and Director Art Wallenstein. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vice President.
Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Madam President, and Ms. Talley. It's great to see you again, and enjoyed our conversations and continued conversations. I couldn't agree more. I second Councilmember Katz's first, and that you are just the right person at the right time for this job, and have all the skills and knowledge and forward thinking, I think, to do a great job. You often talk about end of service, and our police officers, the discussion we just had, have a difficult job, but you have no choice. You have no discretion in who you get.
Sir.
And and the people you get are often coming in some challenging situations, and you have a short window of time to do something with them that's become even shorter, as you mentioned. But you've done a great job, and I think it's a track record. It's a testament to former Director Green and to your work, the type of system we built over the years that I think can improve, and you've talked about that. But I'm so excited to hear you talk about education and the training, and we talked about, when you and I met, about how to embed more of that into the programming and in the jail itself and at various stages. I want to support you 100% with that. So as soon as you have ideas, I think all of my colleagues and I would want to hear about them, and as would, I'm sure, the county executive. And I just want to thank you and look forward to working with you, and I look forward to supporting your nomination.
Thank you. I appreciate your kind words.
Senator Rice.
So, Ms. Talley, it's been 13 years. Since I got elected to state office and had a chance to first run across the great work that you've been doing. Not only are you a person who gets it, but what I appreciate most about you is that you're a person who keeps it real. And I want to say that because we've had a lot of tough discussions about what needs to happen when it comes to reentry, especially when it comes to workforce development and what it means to support people as they're leaving, and how we can continue to support them on their pathway to making better decisions. You believe in that, and you've been open with sharing with me some of the concerns and changes that need to be made, and I appreciate that. I just want to state publicly that that is what is important. If our government is to get better, it's to have people like you in place who are willing to step out and say, no, this is the right thing that we need to do, even though some other folks may not believe that that's the right direction for us. So I thank you for that. You are definitely the best person for this position, and I look forward to working with you in your new role as you continue to move this correctional department forward in so many ways that will be even better for our community. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Councilman Rice. Appreciate your support.
Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Madam President. Ms. Talley, I'm a card-carrying member of your fan club as well. Let me just also state what an impressive and I think it's organic, but there has really been a strong succession of leadership within corrections
Yes, it
that
has.
has built off of itself, which provides sustainability in an area where in other jurisdictions around the country there is tremendous turnover. And so this is something that I think all departments, but in particular those that serve high needs communities such as corrections, we maintain that. I just want to stress and underscore, among the many great things corrections has done under your leadership as well, is actively seek collaboration and partnerships with sister county agencies. I know in recreation, for example, we partnered on the development of a summer camp option for children whose parents may have been incarcerated. And I encourage you, as my colleagues have mentioned, when you have concepts and ideas like that, those programs produce tremendous dividends. And so they can be expensive on the front end, but they save us so much on the back end in so many ways. And so I encourage you through the budget process to, as you identify potential partnerships and alliances, don't be shy. We're here to identify and find creative solutions, and I look forward to very much supporting your nomination and also acknowledging you're wearing University of Maryland colors today.
I am a University of Maryland grad.
So
I am.
Terps.
Thank you.
So,
Go
thank you
Terps.
again. Yes. Thank you again.
And thank you for your feedback the other day. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Hooker.
Thank you. I guess she's working every angle. Ms. Talley, as you know, I'm a big fan of your work as well. I'm very glad and relieved that you're willing to take this big challenge on. One just additional question.
Sure.
We had a big day at the EOB yesterday with the county executive's new executive order regarding community trust. One area of some change will be implementing this really well inside corrections. Can you just comment at all on how you're going to approach educating all your employees about the...
Sure, certainly. And we've already started that.
Thank you.
We started that yesterday. We understand that this is a very sensitive topic and affects individuals and families. And so we're going to, we understand what the county executive's direction is. That message was communicated immediately yesterday. We don't take much to get in motion. I have very capable wardens and deputy wardens who understand the immediacy of what we need to do and changes we need to make. And so we are already prepared.
All right. Well, Ms. Talley, it's been a pleasure having this conversation with you. Really want to thank the county executive for sending your name forward. We will be voting on your confirmation on July 30th.
Okay.
So really do appreciate you taking the time, and also thank you for all your service. And with that, this council is adjourned for the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much.